Chapter 650. Arriving quietly during the interview last time, Qin Sheng knew from Su Yong's dressing style that this man was not a vulgar man who only cared about money. He had a lot of ideas that seemed to be imaginative, but were actually plain and simple. He thought that dealing with investment was like falling in love. You must know what your girlfriend was thinking and do everything possible to coax her. In this way, she would listen to you. Secondly, he thought that trading was an art. Like all the arts in the world, only a real master could make the most perfect work. Needless to say, this man knew a lot about current affairs and made a dynamic model based on it. This made Qin Sheng feel that many seemingly thrilling successes were actually logical. It was just that many people did not understand this logical relationship, and Xu Yong happened to understand this. Tonight, Qin Sheng saw the tender side of this man again. He did not give up his subordinates who had worked hard with him for a long time for the sake of his future and interests. In other words, he had long regarded them as his brothers and sisters. Since they had been honest with each other, the following conversation was very casual. Xu Yong only made two conditions. The first was that the department he was in charge of now could not be abolished and might need to be expanded. After the restructuring of the new company, he would be in charge of it. The second was that he should be given absolute freedom. If he did not understand his investment logic, he should not interfere easily. Anyway, he would definitely not let the company down. These conditions were within Qin Sheng's consideration. Therefore, he did not hesitate at all and directly nodded and agreed. Moreover, he gave Xu Yong the most solid promise. After the reorganization of a new company, Xu Yong would be the executive vice president and be fully responsible for the business of investment and risk control of the company. Xu Yong was very satisfied with this position, but he was not very excited. After all, the pressure on his shoulders was too great, and many things were full of uncertainty. In the end, Qin Sheng began to flatter Xu Yong. "Brother Su, you know I can't stay in Shanghai forever. After I leave, if you're interested, I can also give you the position of president. Of course, I will definitely respect your decision." "Ha, Chairman Qin, that's not necessary. There are other people in the company who are more capable than me. I know what I'm good at. I'm weak in the management of the company, so I'd better do my job." Xu Yong declined politely. He was not that ambitious. Qin Sheng did not force him. He said again, "However, I think your talent is still buried here. If you want, I can let you stand on a higher stage. You have to take things one step at a time." "Thank you, Chairman Qin. Let's talk about it one day," Xu Yong said with a smile. After the matter was settled, the three of them didn't talk about work anymore. Instead, they talked about some trivial things and experiences. After all, everyone had different experiences and attitudes towards life, so the stories they had accumulated were different. It was actually very interesting to talk to each other. In the following 2 days, Qin Sheng was mainly busy with the company's affairs. The company restructuring committee started to get busy. Zhong Shan was in charge of the general direction. The rest of the people had their own duties. They had invited several well-known accounting firms in Shanghai to audit the financial affairs of these companies. This was also the most important part, so Qin Sheng needed to finish it as soon as possible. Qin Sheng and Zhong Shan were busy from morning to night every day. Sometimes, they would even work overtime until 11 or 12 o'clock. Qin Sheng also took some time to go to the hospital in Shangshan Roashe. When he came back every night, Lin Su was already asleep. So these days, Qin Sheng basically slept in the study. Life was like this. Except for poverty, one could get something without sewing. Everything else could only be rewarded by hard work. Feng He had been looking for Hao Lei, but Hao Lei seemed to have disappeared. This made Feng He very dissatisfied. He was afraid that Yin Chaozong would blame him, so he had to increase manpower to look for Hao Lei. At the same time, he asked Gu Xiaobo to take action. He could not let him be idle. Why couldn't he find Hao Lei? Because Hao Lei had been keeping an eye on Gu Xiaobo recently. He had already figured out Gu Xiaobo's life. What surprised him was that Gu Xiaobo did not have any contact with other people in the Yin family except for Feng He. These days, Gu Xiaobo spent most of his time with that woman. Hao Lei was somewhat puzzled until Gu Xiaobo met with Qian Tong and his disciple. When he saw Qian Tong and his disciple, Hao Lei's face instantly turned cold. The person who set Qin Sheng up that night naturally came alight. Except for Yin Chaozong, he could not think of anyone else. After all, Gu Xiaobo was working hard for the Yin family now. Hao Lei asked Tang she to keep an eye on Gu Xiaobo. Then he went to find Qin Sheng. After seeing Qin Sheng, Hao Lei repeated what had happened today. After hearing it, Qin Sheng did not seem to be surprised. Anyway, there were only a few people who could target him. So he said slowly, "It's really them. What should we do? Just endure it? The Yin family is so unscrupulous. Shouldn't we fight back?" Hao Lei said somewhat angrily. As long as Qin Sheng said a word, he would rush to kill Gu Xiaobo or Yin Chaozong right now, regardless of the consequences. Qin Sheng walked out from behind the desk. After thinking for a while, he said, "You've been keeping an eye on Gu Xiaobo for so long. Is there any chance for Gu Xiaobo? We're also looking for a chance. Gu Xiaobo is very cunning. Recently, he almost only accompanied that woman," Hao Lei said impatiently. Qin Sheng frowned and said, "You mean that woman is pregnant?" "Yes. It seems that she has been pregnant for several months. Gu Xiaobo cares about her very much," Hao Lei said honestly. Fortunately, he was a man of principle. If it were someone else who did not have principles, he would probably have vented his anger on this woman long ago. Qin Sheng let out a long sigh and said, "No matter what, tell them not to touch that woman. Every wrong has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. We only need to find Gu Xiaobo." Undeniably, Qin Sheng was kind. Some people thought that he would cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. Hao Lei nodded silently and said, "I know. I've told them not to disturb that woman as much as possible." Qin Sheng did not say anything and poured a glass of water for Hao Lei. During this period, everyone was quite busy. Chang Baji was discussing some plans with Mr. Bao. Hao Lei and Tang, she were responsible for the specific actions. Currently, Qin Sheng had no time to deal with Hangzhou. What should be said had been said. Just now, Qin Sheng also said that if there was a chance, he could directly ask Yang Dainyu to clean up the family. Hao Lei had not met Yang Dainyu yet, but Qin Sheng said that he was also Chang Baji's martial nephew, which meant that he was Gu Xiaobo's senior brother. However, his strength was not comparable to Gu Xiaobo's at all. He could even fight with Chang Baji to a draw. This made Hao Lei somewhat curious. He planned to go out and meet that man later. Qin Sheng continued to be busy. He could not leave anything behind. Hao Lei was also ready to leave. Before he left, he could not help but say, "Han Bing is not in a good mood recently. After you returned to Shanghai this time, you did not go to see her. Is a little bit?" Hao Lei did not say the rest of the words. He already had feelings for Han Bing and did not want to see her sad. Since Han Bing was unwilling to take the initiative to find Qin Sheng, he could only think of a way to help her. Qin Sheng, who had just opened the file, was subconsciously stunned. He was very clear why he did not go to see Han Bing. It was to give Han Bing and Hao Lei more opportunities. That was why he did this. If he and Han Bing had too much contact, Han Bing would be more dependent on him. How could he give Hao Lei a chance? "What's wrong with her?" Qin Sheng asked with concern. Although the matter was more complicated, Qin Sheng was still very concerned about Han Bing. After all, Han Guoping had entrusted Han Bing to him before he left. Hao Lei said honestly, "She was sick some time ago and only recovered these few days. She did not allow me to tell you." Qin Sheng frowned and said, "Then why didn't you tell me earlier? You can just not tell me if she does not allow you to." "Sai, you know her character. When she's fooling around, she is unruly and willful. But when she is serious, she is more stubborn. I can't change her mind. I am afraid that if I tell you, she will be angry and her condition will worsen. So I waited until now to tell you," Hao Lei said helplessly. In fact, except for Han Bing, Hao Lei and Qin Sheng both understood very well. So it was difficult for them to do anything. This was also the crux of the problem. Qin Sheng thought for a while and said, "I will go to see her tomorrow. I have more things to do today." "Okay." Hao Lei nodded. He had said what he needed to say. The rest of the matter would be left to them to discuss. After saying goodbye to Qin Sheng, Hao Lei left the World Financial Center. After he got in the car and left, a car followed him quietly. At the same time, the car made a phone call and said, the target has appeared. On the other side, after receiving the call, Qian Tong and his disciples set off immediately. They hoped to finish this small task as soon as possible. At that time, they would be nervous about the 500,000 yuan. They were very happy just thinking about it. Hao Lei did not go to Tangxi. It was already evening. Today was a half-day holiday. Moreover, Han Bing had called to invite him to dinner. Hao Lei could refuse everyone except Han Bing. Han Bing's company was in Xinyiandi, which was very prosperous. Han Bing randomly chose a restaurant that she often went to. At this time, it was already crowded. When Hao Lei arrived, Han Bing was drinking to drown her sorrows. Other than being trapped by love, what else did Han Bing lack now? She lacked warmth and security. Only Qin Sheng could give her these. Hao Lei sat down directly and complained, "You just recovered not long ago. Why are you drinking again? Didn't the doctor say that you shouldn't drink?" "It's just a little bit. It's okay." Han Bing chuckled and then asked Hao Lei what he wanted to eat. Hao Lei did not have any requirements, so Han Bing ordered for him and gave him some beer. They talked and laughed. Not long after, beautiful women with different temperaments came to the restaurant. They were all Han Bing's friends. So the two groups of people sat together. This time, Hao Lei completely couldn't control Han Bing. He tried to persuade her several times, but it didn't work. He could only let Han Bing drink. When the time came, he would send Han Bing home. The beauties also kept forcing Hao Lei to drink. Fortunately, Hao Lei's alcohol tolerance was not bad. Who knew that they would drink until after 12 o'clock, until Han Bing's friends changed places and left. Hao Lei helped Han Bing walk out of the restaurant. Han Bing said in a daze that the keys were in the company and she had to go back to the company to get them. Hao Lei felt a headache. Fortunately, Han Bing's company was nearby. It was only a short walk. Hao Lei had been there many times, so he had to help Han Bing back to the company first. Chapter 651. She couldn't stand up anymore. I don't know why, but I'm passionately devoted. Han Bing's feelings for Qin Sheng were like this. After her father committed suicide, she could only rely on Qin Sheng. It cannot be helped. Putting aside the fact that her father had handed her over to Qin Sheng, it was mainly because she had experienced a lot of things with Qin Sheng. Especially when she was in danger, Qin Sheng had always been there to protect her. She naturally regarded this man as her backbone. As a result, this kind of feeling gradually sublimated into love. Her feelings for Qin Sheng were very direct, and she never suppressed or restrained her feelings. However, Qin Sheng was always running away, constantly running away, which made her very hurt. It was said that it was easy for a woman to pursue a man. Han Bing didn't believe that Qin Sheng didn't know her feelings for him. She could only say that Qin Sheng might not like her. This matter, until Qin Sheng had a girlfriend, made her completely explode. In addition, Qin Sheng always disappeared for no reason, and Han Bing was always tortured by lovesickness. The reason why Han Bing was hospitalized some time ago was because of Qin Sheng. It was because Qin Sheng returned to Shanghai again and did not take the initiative to contact her, which made her completely sad. Qin Sheng did not take the initiative to look for her, and this time Han Bing was also very stubborn and did not contact Qin Sheng. Therefore, the two of them did not contact each other until now. Han Bing had not drunk since she recovered, but Qin Sheng still did not look for her. That was why Han Bing was so indulgent tonight, plus those few friends were there. Han Bing dared to be so indulgent because she knew that Hao Lei was by her side. She didn't know when this man gradually became her support, or maybe even she didn't know. But she definitely didn't expect that her indulgence this time would bring such heavy consequences to Hao Lei. She would feel guilty for a long time for this. It was not far from Xinyiandi Bailey to Han Bing's company. It was only a few minutes' walk. Along the way, Han Bing was talking nonsense crazily, and no one could hear what she was saying. Hao Lei impatiently comforted this pitiful, silly woman. Han Bing's company was in a creative cultural industrial area that was quiet in the midst of noise. This place was transformed from an old bungalow. Han Bing's company was relatively large here, occupying an old bungalow of hundreds of square meters. The environment inside was very suitable for brain workers like them who needed inspiration. At this time, there was no one in the company. Han Bing was quite considerate of the company's employees. The latest overtime was no more than 10 o'clock. Of course, there were special times, but it was relatively rare. He first placed Han Bing on the sofa in the rest area, and then found her house key in her office. After coming out, he poured Han Bing a glass of water to sober her up. When he felt that Han Bing had sobered up a lot, they left the company. It was very lively here during the day, with many office workers and tourists coming and going, but it was strangely quiet at night, not to mention that it was already so late. Hao Lei held on to Han Bing and walked a few steps before he felt something was amiss, because the street lamp in front of them had stretched a shadow infinitely. It was obviously not their shadow. Hao Lei slowly raised his head and looked into the distance. Under the streetlight, there was a man whose face could not be seen clearly staring at them. The man was definitely not an ordinary passerby or a security guard. There was only one word to describe him: danger. The uninvited guest came prepared. This was Hao Lei's intuition. He subconsciously stopped in his tracks and instantly became alert. Han Bing asked in a daze, "What's wrong?" Hao Lei said with a smile, "It's nothing. You sit by the roadside and rest. I'll send you home after I'm done with this trivial matter." Han Bing was a little confused. What did he mean? Hao Lei did not have time to explain, because the man under the streetlight, not far away, had slowly walked towards them. The dangerous aura was also getting heavier. Hao Lei had just put Han Bing down when he inadvertently caught a glimpse of another man walking out from the corner behind them. The man was whistling leisurely, as if full of provocation, giving off the same feeling of danger. One in front and one behind, they slowly walked forward, as if not giving Hao Lei any way out. Moreover, Hao Lei was carrying a drunk Han Bing, so there was no way out. At this moment, no matter how stupid Hao Lei was, he knew that these two men were not good people. They were coming for them, but he was not sure if they were coming for him or Han Bing. But there was no need for an answer anymore. Call for help? It was too late now. He estimated that before he took out his phone, these two men would be in front of him. It seemed that no one could save them at this moment except for the Daluo god who descended from the sky. Hao Lei had no choice. He only had one choice, which was to face the enemy head-on and fight his way out. Only in this way could he leave with Han Bing. Otherwise, they would all be in trouble tonight. While Hao Lei was still deep in thought, these two men had already arrived in front of Hao Lei. They were only 2 meters away from Hao Lei. Hao Lei had already seen the appearance of these two men clearly. One looked very young, and the other looked a little old. But from their aura, he could feel that they were not simple. These two men were none other than Qian Tong and his disciple, who were carrying out this mission. How could they let go of this opportunity so easily? For them, the prey in front of them was already in the bag. There was no challenge at all. They might only need to spend a little time, and then the 500,000 would be in their account. What kind of business could be easier than this in the world? Han Bing, who was drunk, was a little confused. She did not know what was going on at all. Her brain wanted to sober up, but the alcohol continued to numb her. She could only look at the scene in front of her blankly. Hao Lei asked in a deep voice, "Who are you?" If he had arrived in time on the night of Qing Er's accident, he might have recognized who these two men were. Unfortunately, they did not find any clues in the end. Qian Tong laughed and said, "Do you need to know?" Hao Lei still wanted to figure out one thing. He hesitated for a moment and asked, "Me or her?" Qian Tong shrugged and said, "Of course it's you. It is not worth for us to deal with a woman. You are worth it. Don't worry, we won't do anything to her." Then come on. After Hao Lei confirmed this matter, he put down all the burdens and said bluntly. Qian Tong admired him very much and said, "You are so direct and manly." But no matter how much they admired him, they would not say no to money. Moreover, they did not have any relationship with Hao Lei. For them, Hao Lei was just a prey. At this point, there was no way out. It seemed that he would not beg for mercy, let alone hope that they would let him go. The only thing he could do was to fight to the death. Therefore, Hao Lei did not say any nonsense. He suddenly took action without warning and went straight to the old man in front of him, who might be easier to deal with. As long as he killed one of them, the pressure on him would be reduced instantly. Unfortunately, he made a wrong choice. Qian Tong's master was naturally more powerful than Qian Tong. Although Qian Tong was not as good as his master now, He would surpass his master sooner or later. Although Hao Lei had drunk a lot of wine, he was very clear about his situation. Therefore, he used all his strength as soon as he came up to Qian Tong's master as fast as lightning. He aimed a killing move at Qian Tong's master's neck. The wind of his fist was mixed with murderous intent, and the sound of it piercing through the air could be heard. Qian Tong's master stood still. He took 2 steps back and then stretched out his arm to block Hao Lei's punch. Hao Lei was not surprised. If he did not even have this little strength, why did he come out to make a fool of himself? He took advantage of the situation again and kicked at Qian Tong's master's waist. Qian Tong's master was still not in a hurry. He raised his knee and blocked Hao Lei's calf, preventing him from advancing any further. Hao Lei was still not in a hurry. He followed up with a combination of punches, forcing Qian Tong's master to attack him. Only then would he expose an opening. At this time, Qian Tong, who was behind Hao Lei, had already quietly made his move. He did not stand by and watch. This was not a martial arts competition, so did he really have to watch them fight it out? What they needed to do now was to use the fastest method to complete the task in the shortest amount of time possible. This way, there would not be any mistakes, and it was also the safest way for them. Therefore, after Qian Tong joined in, Hao Lei, who could have continued to attack, could only defend in an instant. He had no choice but to let go as he had no room to fight back. Although this was not a battle where there was a great disparity in strength, Hao Lei was still inferior to Qian Tong's master and disciple. If Qian Tong and disciple could not even deal with Hao Lei, then Feng He spending so much money to hire them would really be a joke. Therefore, in the blink of an eye, Hao Lei had already been kicked in the abdomen by Qian Tong's master with a tricky leg technique, and he flew straight back. Hao Lei did not fall to the ground in a sorry state, but he looked to be in pain. The pain in his abdomen made him gasp for breath. Qian Tong and disciple did not give Hao Lei time to catch his breath and rushed over again. Hao Lei endured the pain and moved forward, but the sweat on his head had already told him what kind of situation he was in now. Therefore, it did not take long. In just a few moves, Hao Lei was punched in the face by Qian Tong. This punch was so powerful that it directly stunned Hao Lei. Hao Lei instantly saw stars, not to mention the gushing nosebleed and 2 teeth falling out. On the other side, Han Bing, who had not yet woken up, was completely stunned by what was happening in front of her. What was going on? Was it an illusion? The figure in front of her became more and more blurred, and she could not see clearly what was happening. She grabbed her hair with a headache, and then suddenly screamed loudly. Han Bing's scream also made Qian Tong and disciple decide to quickly end the battle, because they did not know if Han Bing's scream would attract people passing by. If that happened, it would be troublesome if they wanted to leave. Therefore, after the master and disciple looked at each other, they once again rushed toward Hao Lei, who had just fallen to the ground and stood up again. Hao Lei stood up almost instinctively and rushed forward again. However, this time, it was only a face-to-face encounter, and Hao Lei flew back again and again, smashing heavily into the wall next to him. He fell to the ground again and stood up again and again. Even though he knew that he did not know his opponent, even though he knew that there was a huge gap in strength, even though he knew that he would definitely die, for Hao Lei, who was once a soldier king, he could only lie down and die. This was the dignity that a former soldier and a man must have. Chapter 652. Prepare for the worst. Hao Lei didn't admit defeat or beg for mercy. He knew it wasn't necessary. Although these 2 men told him that they would not hurt Han Bing, how could Hao Lei believe them so easily? The Jianghu was dangerous, and people's hearts were complicated. Who knew what the other party's goal was? Therefore, as long as he defeated them, he could protect Han Bing and leave safely. Therefore, Hao Lei could only fight, regardless of the result. If he lost, his skills were inferior. If he won, everyone would be happy. Unfortunately, the goddess of luck was not on his side this time. Hao Lei lost completely and miserably in a situation where the disparity in strength was too great. Qian Tong and his disciple had suffered some insignificant injuries, but they were fine. If either of them had encountered Hao Lei, they might have been in some danger. Hao Lei, who had fallen into a desperate situation, would definitely choose to perish together with them. However, this time, the master and disciple had worked together. Their many years of tacit understanding had increased their overall strength, so Hao Lei had nothing to say about his defeat. The matter was already over. The master and disciple stared at Hao Lei, who had fainted on the ground. Their eyes were filled with disdain. They had thought that Hao Lei was some powerful character, but it turned out that he was just SOSO. It was a false alarm for the master and disciple. The $500,000 was too easy to earn. It would be great if there were more such incidents in the future. They were absolutely sure that even if this man did not die, he would definitely be lying in the hospital for at least half a year. They still had this bit of confidence. Brother, there's nothing we can do about it. We're just taking someone's money to get rid of this disaster. Don't blame us. Qian Tong let out a long sigh. The strength and dignity that this man had displayed truly made his opponent admire him. But he had admired many people over the years, so he didn't lack one. Han Bing was still screaming. She seemed to have sobered up a lot and finally understood what had happened. After all, she had experienced those life and death situations with Qin Sheng. Qian Tong had a headache. He turned around and frowned at Han Bing, who was sitting on the ground. TSK, TSK, TSK. She was indeed a great beauty. Unfortunately, he did not have the fortune to enjoy it. He still had a bottom line. Moreover, his master was very strict with him when it came to women. If he messed around, his master would definitely break his legs. Qian Tong's master looked calm. He, who had experienced too many things, was neither sad nor happy. He said casually, "Stop looking. It's time to go. If you don't go now, you won't be able to." Qian Tong nodded, but he still felt sorry for the beauty in front of him. If she could be his girlfriend, it would definitely be a happy thing. Qian Tong and his disciple came and left in a hurry, leaving behind Hao Lei, who was seriously injured and whose life was uncertain, and Han Bing, who was panic-stricken and helpless. Fortunately, they did not harm to Han Bing. Hao Lei, who was still would be. Tong had not. She. How I Han Bing. How T. Bing Han hatted. Han Bing staggered towards Hao Lei, but after a few steps, her legs gave way and she fell to the ground. So she crawled and finally arrived in front of Hao Lei. She did not care about her image anymore. With Hao Bing is how he Bing, lay under Bing 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 et Bing. Hao Lei didn't respond. He was still in a coma. This was probably the worst defeat in his life. He had never been so seriously injured. He didn't even know if he was dead or alive. Hao Lei did not respond at all. He was still unconscious. This was probably the worst defeat in his life. He had never suffered such a serious injury. Now, he did not even know if he was dead or alive. But Hao Lei still didn't respond. Han Bing knew how serious the situation was. She panicked and didn't know what to do. "Help! Is there anyone?" At the Shanghai World Financial Center, Qin Sheng was still working overtime. Zhong Shan and Yin Pan were also working overtime. At the same time, many members of the preparatory committee were still there. The whole office was brightly lit. Everyone was busy, hoping that the company's restructuring would end as soon as possible. In the Shanghai World Financial Center, Qin Sheng was still working overtime. Of course, Zhongshan and Yin Pan were also working overtime. At the same time, many members of the preparatory committee were still there. The whole office was brightly lit. Everyone was busy, hoping that the company's restructuring would end as soon as possible. At the Shanghai World Financial Center, Qin Sheng was still working overtime. Of course, Zhongshan and Yin Pan were also working overtime. At the same time, many members of the preparatory committee were still there. The whole office was brightly lit. Everyone was busy, hoping that the company's restructuring would end as soon as possible. Yin Pan, who was dressed in professional attire, laughed and said, "The boss hasn't left yet. How dare I leave? What if I get fired tomorrow?" Qin Sheng laughed and said, "You are my housekeeper now. I don't care about firing you. Where can I find such a competent secretary?" Yin Pan covered her mouth and chuckled. The Dior perfume on her body was very comfortable. Qin Sheng didn't know which model it was. "Ha ha. I'm just afraid that your boyfriend will blame me. After all, you're getting married soon." Qin Sheng took the coffee and chuckled. Yin Pan didn't respond. She just smiled bitterly to hide the pain in her heart. This matter had been tormenting her recently. Only when she came to Shanghai did she know how unreasonable and childish her boyfriend was. Distance makes the heart grow fonder. Distance could also make people see clearly. After Qin Sheng drank a few mouthfuls of coffee, he suddenly rubbed his temples and frowned. Hey, my right eyelid keeps twitching recently. It's said that when the left eyelid twitches, the right eyelid twitches, the bad things will happen. I wonder what bad things have happened. Yin Pan complained. Boss, don't say such discouraging words. You must be too tired recently. I'm just joking. Qin Sheng laughed and didn't care about it. Of course, he didn't believe in these things. He continued to work overtime crazily. A few minutes later, Qin Sheng's phone suddenly rang. He looked at the time. It was already 12 o'clock. He guessed that it should be Lin Su calling him to ask when he would be home. If it was too late, she wouldn't wait. However, when Qin Sheng picked up his phone, he saw that it was Han Bing's phone number. This made Qin Sheng a little surprised. He did not expect that Han Bing would call him so late at night. Could it be that Hao Lei and Han Bing talked about something, so Han Bing suddenly called him? Or maybe Han Bing was drunk or lonely, so she called him to talk about it. It could also be that Han Bing had something to do. Therefore, Qin Sheng didn't think much about it. He picked up the phone and took the initiative to ask, "It's so late. Why did you suddenly call me?" Qin Sheng was ready to receive a scolding from Han Bing, or a taunt that she would not allow him to call her if he did not call her, and so on. However, what he received was a stranger's voice. "Are you Qin Sheng?" Qin Sheng's face changed slightly. What was going on? Could it be that something happened to Han Bing? Qin Sheng asked subconsciously, "Who are you?" "Oh, I'm a doctor from the hospital. Your friend's mood is a little unstable, so he asked me to call you. Come to the hospital quickly. Your friend, Hao Lei, has an accident and is being rescued in the operating room." Outside the operating room of a hospital nearest to Xinyiandi, a nurse holding a mobile phone called Qin Sheng. In the corridor outside the operating room, Han Bing slumped on the bench with a blank face. Her whole person was lost, as if her soul had been taken away. Her face was especially ugly. In the office of the World Financial Center, after hearing this sentence, Qin Sheng's whole mind instantly went blank. What was going on? What happened? On the sofa not far away, Zhong Shan, who was contemplating a problem, felt that something was wrong. He subconsciously looked at Qin Sheng and found that Qin Sheng was in a daze. He was puzzled and asked, "What's wrong?" Yin Pan also felt that something was wrong. She had never seen this prince like this. Could it be that something big had happened? In just a few seconds, countless possibilities flashed through Qin Sheng's mind, but he had no time to care about what happened, because Hao Lei was being rescued in the operating room. He was being rescued in the operating room. This was his best brother. If something happened to him, Qin Sheng really didn't know what would happen. So Qin Sheng almost shouted, "Which hospital are you from?" After confirming which hospital it was, Qin Sheng directly ran out like crazy and went straight to the elevator. Along the way, everyone was dumbfounded. They did not know what had happened. What had happened to the crown prince, who was usually calm and experienced? Yin Pan was confused. What was going on? What happened? Zhong Shan was the first to react. Something big must have happened. Otherwise, based on Qin Sheng's character, he would definitely not be like this. Moreover, he just heard Qin Sheng ask which hospital they were from. Zhong Shan was worried that something unexpected would happen again, especially Qin Sheng's safety. He immediately called Chang Baji and repeated what had happened just now. In a villa in Jing, and Chang Baji was chatting with Bao Fan and deducing the direction of some things. These were all the tasks that Qin Sheng gave them. After receiving Zhong Shan's call, his face changed instantly. He immediately called Qin Sheng, but did not pick up and immediately got busy. Yang Daniu drove Qin Sheng to the hospital. Qin Sheng had already ordered him to get to the hospital as soon as possible. Therefore, Yang Daniu ran a lot of red lights on the way. He could not care about how to deal with it later. He could only complete the task that Qin Sheng gave him first. Fortunately, it was very late and the traffic on the road was not heavy. When they arrived at the hospital, Qin Sheng ran all the way to the operating room. After asking again and again, he finally found out which operating room Hao Lei was in. Young Daniu and the bodyguards who arrived later ran all the way after him. Everyone in the hospital was confused. What happened? When Qin Sheng rushed out of the operating room, he saw Han Bing, who was sitting there in a daze. He did not have time to ask the doctor about it. Instead, he ran directly to Han Bing. Subconsciously, he smelled the smell of alcohol on Han Bing. Qin Sheng's face became more and more ugly. He hugged Han Bing's shoulders and asked, "What happened?" Han Bing looked up in a daze. When she saw that it was Qin Sheng, she could not hold it in anymore and burst into tears. Qin Sheng did not have any protective feelings for the fair sex. Instead, he shook Han Bing's shoulders hard and said, "Han Bing, tell me what happened." Han Bing directly hugged Qin Sheng's waist and cried bitterly. In the end, Qin Sheng still held it in and did not have the heart to continue asking. He could only comfort Han Bing first. At this time, Qin Sheng's phone kept ringing. Qin Sheng did not have time to answer the phone. He passed the phone to Yang Daniu and let him handle it. The first person to call was Chang Baji. Yang Daniu told Uncle Chang what happened honestly. When he knew the truth, he was shocked. He asked why Qin Sheng and Hao Lei did not answer his calls. After Chang Baji hung up the phone, he looked at Bao Fan, who was sitting opposite him, and said, "Boss Bao, something happened to Hao Lei. He is being treated in the hospital." Bao Fan's face changed instantly, but he did not hesitate. He immediately stood up and said, "Let's go to the hospital." Not long after, Lin Su called Qin Sheng again. Her original intention was to ask when Qin Sheng would be coming home. She also worked overtime today and had just returned home not long ago. She was considering if she should wait for Qin Sheng to come back. Unexpectedly, it was Yang Daniu who answered the phone. When Yang Daniu finished talking, Lin Su was so shocked that she could not say anything. After asking which hospital it was, she hurried over. In the hospital, Qin Sheng was comforting Han Bing. At this time, a doctor walked out. Qin Sheng immediately let go of Han Bing and ran over to ask, "Doctor, how is my brother?" The doctor glanced at Qin Sheng and let out a long sigh. "You're his family, right? The patient's condition is a little serious. You should be prepared for the worst." Chapter 653. A debt of blood must be paid in Blood Chapter 654. A debt of blood for the doctors and nurses in the hospital. They were used to seeing too many deaths. Even if they felt a little sorry, they would not have too much psychological fluctuation. They just told the patient's families the truth. Maybe it was a little exaggerated to say that they should be prepared for the worst. After all, no one knew what would happen during an operation, and any accident could happen. However, for Qin Sheng, this sentence made him feel very heavy in an instant. He did not expect the situation to be so serious. He was extremely gloomy and angry. He subconsciously grabbed the doctor's shoulder and threatened loudly, "I don't care what you do. You must save my brother, or I won't forgive you." Obviously, Qin Sheng was a little embarrassed. The doctor was used to this kind of situation. In extreme emotions, the patient's family could do anything, so he calmly comforted him. "Don't be angry. Don't worry, we will try our best." This kind of situation rarely happened to Qin Sheng, but he was also a man of flesh and blood, affectionate and righteous. When his brother, who had been with him for so long, had an accident and did not know whether he was alive or dead, how could he not be excited? From childhood to adulthood, Hao Lei was the only friend who had accompanied him to this day. He used to think that Su Qin would always be with him, but he did not expect that it would be Hao Lei. Qin Sheng had deep feelings for this brother, but men were not good at expressing their feelings with words, nor were they willing to be so pretentious. Because many things were well known to each other, there was no need to be so polite to say it out. Especially when he needed help the most, Hao Lei followed him to Shanghai without hesitation. In the past few years, no matter what Qin Sheng asked him to do, Hao Lei would do it without hesitation. He did not complain, never refused, and never said it was hard or tired. No matter what happened to him, no matter how low he was, Hao Lei always followed him and gave him the help he needed the most. This was a brother. How many brothers could a person have in his life? Among his friends in junior high and high school, Hao Lei was the only one who could still be recognized by him. Today, this brother of his had such an accident, and he might never wake up again. How could Qin Sheng not be excited? He was afraid of losing this only brother. The doctor came out because he had something to do. Now he was stopped by Qin Sheng. Seeing that Qin Sheng was too emotional, the nurse quickly ran over and held him back, fearing that he would do something to hurt the doctor. Yang Daniu also ran over in a hurry. He pulled Qin Sheng away and said, "Brother Qin, it's okay. It's definitely okay." Only then did Qin Sheng come back to his senses. He calmed down a little and restrained his emotions. At this moment, he could not be flustered. The situation in the operating room was still unclear. The only thing Qin Sheng could do was to ask the hospital to do their best. The hospital would definitely not listen to him. Therefore, Qin Sheng immediately called Xue Qinyan and asked her to help him contact the hospital to inform them. In this way, the hospital would take action. Xue Qinyan had actually fallen asleep. She had been working hard recently, so she went to bed early tonight. However, she did not have the habit of turning off her phone at night, but she would adjust it to vibrate mode. If there was anything urgent, she could deal with it at any time. Qin Sheng made 2 calls in a row. Fortunately, Xue Qinyan had just fallen asleep. She got up and picked up her phone. Seeing that it was Qin Sheng's call, she did not think much and casually answered the call. But when Xue Qinyan heard what Qin Sheng said, she immediately woke up. Of course, she knew Hao Lei and Qin Sheng and Hao Lei's situation. Now that Hao Lei was in the hospital, it could be seen that something serious had happened. What on earth was going on? After Xue Qinyan asked, Qin Sheng honestly answered that he had not figured it out yet. But this was not the most important thing now. The most important thing was to save Hao Lei's life. Therefore, Qin Sheng told her the reason why he called. Xue Qinyan first comforted Qin Sheng and told him not to worry. She would make a call now, and then she would rush to the hospital. Qin Sheng nodded silently and hung up the phone. He did not stand on ceremony and said thank you. There was no need to be so polite between sister and brother. In the hospital, Qin Sheng could only wait anxiously for the result. At the same time, he comforted Han Bing. He hoped that Han Bing could tell him what had happened after she sobered up or recovered. More than 10 minutes later, Chang Baji and Bao Fan arrived at the hospital first. Qin Sheng and Hao Lei were very close. Chang Baji and Hao Lei had been together for so long, so naturally they were very close. Whether they were in Shanghai, Hangzhou, or Beijing, they lived together. It could be said that after spending more than 2 years together, Chang Baji and Hao Lei's relationship was much closer than his relationship with Qin Sheng. Now that Hao Lei was in trouble, how could Chang Baji not worry? When they arrived at the hospital, Chang Baji hurriedly asked, "How is Lei Zi?" From the way Chang Baji called Hao Lei Zi, it could be seen how close Chang Baji and Hao Lei were. Qin Sheng said blankly, still in the emergency room. "What did the doctor say?" Chang Baji asked again. Bao Fan was just a little worried about Qin Sheng's condition. Moreover, they were not in a good situation now. There were a lot of things for Qin Sheng to do. Qin Sheng frowned and said in a low voice, "Still in the emergency room. The situation is serious. The doctor asked us to prepare for the worst." Hearing this, Chang Baji's eyes became a little gloomy. He did not expect the situation to be so serious, so he said in a low voice, "Who did it?" Qin Sheng shook his head subconsciously. He did not care about this at all now. He just wanted to make sure that Hao Lei was not in trouble. As for other things, he could think about it later. Xue Qinyan was indeed very powerful. It did not take her long to directly contact her friend in the Municipal Health Bureau. That leader directly called the director of the hospital here and told him to use all the resources in the hospital to save the patient. If there were any problems, he could contact him at any time. After this phone call, the hospital's attitude immediately changed. A vice president on duty soon came over and quickly formed a cross-hospital expert group. At the same time, authoritative experts in this field were transferred from other hospitals to help and so on. Qin Sheng did not have time to deal with these things. These things were all handled by Bao Fan. He was originally good at these things, so he absolutely handled them well. Not long after, Xue Qinyan and Lin Su arrived at the hospital almost at the same time. Qin Sheng did not expect them to come. He frowned and asked, "Why are you here?" Shui Qingyan said very worriedly, "Such a big thing happened. How can we not come?" Qingsheng thought about it and agreed. Such a big thing happened, and they also knew Hao Lei very well. How could they fall asleep? So they did not say much. Shui Qingyan asked again, "What's the situation now?" "Still in the rescue. The situation is a bit serious. I don't know if he can get through this," Qin Sheng said with a long sigh and rubbed his hair hard. Shui Qingyan's face was a little gloomy. Lin Su held Qin Sheng's arm and comforted him. "It's okay, it's definitely okay. Hao Lei is very lucky. He will definitely be fine." Qin Sheng patted Lin Su's arm gently, using his eyes to tell her that he was fine. Such a big thing happened in this special period. It must not be without a reason. So Shui Qingyan asked again, "You still don't know what's going on?" Qin Sheng looked at Han Bing not far away and said, "When she wakes up a little, maybe she will know something." At this time, Shui Qingyan and Lin Su noticed Han Bing. After saying a few words to Qin Sheng, they walked over quickly. Qin Sheng also handed Han Bing over to them to take care of. In the operating room, a few doctors walked in and out. Bao Fan immediately went up to ask about the current progress. After getting the exact situation, he came back to report to Qin Sheng. Looking at Qin Sheng and Chang Baji, Bao Fan said very seriously, "The doctor said that the brain suffered a very serious external heavy blow. Ribs, arms, and calves are fractured. His internal organs are also seriously injured. It's all caused by someone, so we have to be prepared." Such serious injuries, and hearing that they were all caused by someone, even if Qin Sheng and Chang Baji were stupid, they knew what was going on. That was, someone did something to Hao Lei tonight. Who was it? As for the last sentence that Bao Fan said, "We need to be prepared," was it to prepare for the worst or to prepare to face a crisis? I don't know. Maybe it was a combination of both. Time ticked by. It was already 3 o'clock in the morning. The operation was still going on. Doctors came in and out of the operating room. Hao Lei and the others did not dare to ask about the situation, for fear of getting the best result. Shui Qingyan and Lin Su kept comforting Han Bing. Only then did Han Bing completely recover. She had already sobered up, so Shui Qingyan came over and told Qin Sheng that Han Bing had remembered what happened tonight. They could ask her. In an empty office in the hospital, Qin Sheng, Chang Baji, and Bao Fan faced Han Bing. Han Bing told them everything that happened tonight. As for the fight at the company's entrance, it was indeed a little vague. She only told Qin Sheng that there were 2 men, one older and the other younger, and both of them were very powerful. Then Han Bing told Qin Sheng and them that she only saw Hao Lei falling down again and again, and then getting up again and again, until he could no longer stand up. In the end, because of his scream, the security guards patrolling nearby were attracted, so the security guards called the ambulance and sent Hao Lei to the hospital. At this point, everything came to light, and it was really like that. Han Bing thought it was because of her. She hugged Qin Sheng tightly and cried, "I'm sorry, I'm really sorry, it's all my fault, it's all my fault, I hurt Hao Lei, I hurt him, I shouldn't have let him drink, it's all my fault, sob, sob, sob." Qin Sheng comforted her, "It's nothing to do with you, don't think too much. There were 2 men, one old and one young." Qin Sheng could not confirm their identities, nor was he sure who they were. So Qin Sheng ordered Chang Baji, "Lao Chang, get someone to check the surrounding surveillance video. I hope it hasn't been destroyed." Chang Baji immediately made the arrangements. He was more eager to know who it was than Qin Sheng. Bao Fan frowned and asked, "Do we need to call the police?" Qin Sheng shook his head and said, "Blood for blood. I'll let them pay with their lives." Chapter 654. Let's start revenge. There was a small bug in the previous chapter. Hao Lei had seen Gu Xiaobo and Qian Tong's master meet before, so he must know Qian Tong and Qian Tong, so he had already corrected it. If Hao Lei's accident was just an accident, Qin Sheng could accept it. After all, there were too many accidents in life. You would never know which would come first, the accident or tomorrow. Maybe this was Hao Lei's fate, and he could not blame anyone. No matter how worried, sad, and upset Qin Sheng was, he could not stop the accident from happening. But this time, Hao Lei's accident was not a natural disaster, but a man-made disaster. He was so seriously injured, and it was all beaten up by someone. Who was it that wanted Hao Lei's life so badly? Who was it that hated Hao Lei so much? Qin Sheng was completely angry, so no matter who it was this time, he would make them pay a heavy price. Now that Han Bing had finally woken up, and they had completely figured out what was going on, they could use their resources to find the mastermind. As for how to take revenge, that was a matter for later. After coming out of the office, Chang Baji directly left the hospital, and at the same time, he took a few bodyguards with him. Bao Fan also left. If they needed any resources, Bao Fan could give them the most direct help, so there was no need to trouble Xue Qinyan. Qin Sheng was too anxious just now and actually forgot about the existence of Bao Fan. Didn't the old man send Bao Fan to him to deal with these trivial matters? Bao Fan represented the old man in Shanghai, and he knew a lot of so-called big shots in Shanghai. The operation was still in progress, and everyone was just waiting for the result, so they did not need to stay here. Qin Sheng was enough. No matter what the final result was, they would take revenge for Hao Lei and would not let go of this group of people this time. At 4 o'clock in the morning, the hospital returned to peace. Except for the doctors who were still busy, the others could only wait outside the operating room. So what if they were anxious? Qin Sheng looked at Han Bing, who was in a bad mood and state, and sighed helplessly. He hoped that Han Bing was not the target of this incident. Otherwise, Han Bing would feel guilty for a long time because Hao Lei was doing this to protect her. Moreover, she might not know that Hao Lei liked her, which was why she was trying her best to protect him. If something really happened to Hao Lei, maybe it would be better for her not to know, and then she would feel less guilty, or it would be hard for her to walk away from this matter. Qin Sheng felt sorry for Han Bing, so he said, Han Bing, you'd better go back and rest. I'll stay in the hospital. I'll inform you if there's any news. Han Bing shook her head vigorously and said, No, I'll stay here. From Han Bing's attitude, Qin Sheng knew that this woman's stubborn side was about to explode. No matter what he said, she would not leave the hospital. Qin Sheng did not say anything else. If she was willing to wait, then let her continue to wait. Perhaps she would feel better this way. Consequently, Qin Sheng looked at Xue Qinyan and Lin Su and said, Sister, that's enough. You still have something to do tomorrow. You can go back first. It's meaningless for everyone to stay in hospital. I'll wait here. Lin Su was more or less worried about Qin Sheng. She held his arm and said, I'll stay with you. At this moment, Han Bing could not care less about Qin Sheng and Lin Su's doting. If it was during normal times, she might even be jealous. Qin Sheng stroked Lin Su's hair and said, I'm fine. After all these years, I've experienced what I should. Don't worry. Lin Su hesitated for a moment. In the end, she turned around and left the hospital with Xue Qinyan. However, even if she went back, she might not be able to sleep. Therefore, Xue Qinyan was very understanding of Lin Su. She took the initiative to invite Lin Su to her house. In this way, the two of them could accompany each other. Even if something happened, they could rush to the hospital in time. Lin Su did not refuse. Tom did not wait for anyone. Tom would not stop for a second. Very soon, the sky was bright. However, the surgery was still in progress, and there was still no result. During this period, Chang Baji called. As expected, the surveillance video of the cultural district had been deleted. There were no clues left. However, they were trying to find a way to get the video of all the company gates nearby. After all, these companies were single-family houses. There was an internal surveillance video installed at the entrance of each house. They were not under the management of the cultural district. However, these needed some time. Moreover, it was so late. They might not be able to find any clues. Qin Sheng did not say anything. He just let Chang Baji continue to investigate. In the hospital, apart from Qin Sheng and Han Bing, Yang Dainiu and a few other bodyguards accompanied Qin Sheng. After dawn, Yang Dainiu asked the bodyguards to go out and buy some breakfast. Qin Sheng and Han Bing had no appetite. They just drank some water and waited. At around 10 o'clock in the morning, the surgery that lasted for 10 hours finally ended. The doctors and nurses had changed a few times, because Hao Lei's injuries were more serious and complicated. Not only did he have external and bone injuries, but his head and internal organs were also severely damaged. Therefore, it was not something that one or two doctors could handle. When the doctors walked out of the ward, Qin Sheng could see that they were very tired. He did not know if the surgery was over, so he did not disturb the doctors. He thought that the surgery would continue. However, the doctor asked the nurse to call Qin Sheng over and told him that the surgery was over. Qin Sheng's heart was in his throat. He was afraid that the result was the worst. So he asked with a trembling voice, "Doctor, how is it?" Han Bing did not follow him. She actually wanted to, but she could not move her legs. It was as if they were filled with thousands of kilograms of mercury. Because she was afraid, the doctor took a deep breath and said slowly, "We have tried our best. We have done everything that should be done." Hearing this, Qin Sheng's heart sank. Did that mean that the surgery was over? Was it really the worst possible outcome? After waiting for a whole night, this was the result. God, why are you so cruel? However, the doctor's next words gave Qin Sheng hope. It also made Qin Sheng almost say, "Doctor, can you not say that? You almost scare me to death." Because the doctor said, "We have rescued the patient. But whether he can survive these few days and whether he can survive the critical period, we dare not guarantee. It depends on the patient himself. So you still have to prepare for the worst." It was not the worst result, nor was it the best result, but it was already a very good result. Qin Sheng was satisfied enough. He knew that the doctors were very tired, so he did not ask them anything else. Instead, he asked them to go back and rest early. Of course, he would not mistreat these doctors. Bao Fan had already arranged for all the doctors and nurses who performed the surgery last night to receive a red packet. This was Qin Sheng's gratitude to them. As for whether they accepted it or not, Qin Sheng did not care. Not long after, Hao Lei was pushed out of the operating room. Qin Sheng wanted to go over and take a look, but was stopped by the nurses. He did not force them and just escorted Hao Lei into the ICU. Then, Qin Sheng thought of Han Bing. He ran back to the corridor outside the operating room and slowly walked in front of Han Bing. Han Bing carefully raised her head and looked at Qin Sheng. Her eyes were very confused, and she did not have the courage to speak. Qin Sheng told her directly, "The doctor said that he has been rescued, but he is still in the critical period. We do not know if he can survive, so we have to wait for another 48 hours. When Han Bing heard this news, it was not the news she was most afraid of. She firmly believed that Hao Lei could survive the critical period, so she nodded her head vigorously. Qin Sheng sighed. It should be work time now, so he called Yin Pan to transfer 2 secretaries from the general office to take care of Han Bing. At the same time, he also told Zhong Shan that he might not be able to go to the company recently, so he would be in charge of everything. Zhong Shan already knew what happened last night. It was Chang Baji who told him, so he could understand Qin Sheng. He asked Qin Sheng to busy himself with other things first, and he would be in charge of the company. Not long after, Lin Shi called again and asked why Qin Sheng did not come to the company today. Recently, he was also busy giving advice to Qin Sheng. Qin Sheng said that he would not go to the company in advance these few days. He also did not dare to tell Lin Shi about Hao Lei's accident for fear that they would be worried. Lin Shi did not ask much. He knew that Qin Sheng had more things to do, so he said that he would take care of the company, so that Qin Sheng did not need to worry. Everything was on the right track. Not long after hanging up, Chang Baji called. In short, Qin Sheng had been answering the phone all the time, and he was very busy. Chang Baji said that he found the video of the 2 men last night from the surveillance camera at the entrance of the company, but he was not sure whether it was the 2 men, so he sent it to Qin Sheng for Han Bing to identify. Qin Sheng asked him to send the video over. After the video was sent over, Qin Sheng first opened it and watched it. When he saw the blurred faces of the 2 men, Qin Sheng instantly recognized them, because these 2 men were the 2 men who fought with him on the night when Qin had an accident. Qin Sheng was burning with anger. What else was there to say? There was no need to let Han Bing see it all. Qin Sheng could directly confirm that the 2 men who attacked Hao Lei last night were definitely them, because there was no such coincidence in the world. Therefore, it could be concluded that the people who attacked him that day and Hao Lei last night were definitely the same group of people. So it could be concluded that these people's ultimate target was still him, and Hao Lei also suffered because of him. Qin Sheng was very angry, almost to the extreme. Who on earth was it? The Yin family, Third Master Wu, other people in Hangzhou, or Beijing, or Shueke's group, or maybe several forces joined forces. Qin Sheng did not know if it was because he was too tired. He seemed to have forgotten one thing. In order to make sure that it was not a mistake, Qin Sheng quickly took the video to Han Bing. After watching it, Han Bing almost shouted, "It's them, it's them, it's them." At this point, there was no doubt. Qin Sheng immediately called Chang Baji and told him everything. Chang Baji was also very shocked. He did not expect this result, so it was easy to deal with it. Qin Sheng asked Chang Baji and Bao Fan to rush to the hospital quickly to discuss the next plan. He must find these two men and at the same time dig out the backstage manipulator and then start the revenge plan. At this time, Qin Sheng suddenly remembered what Hao Lei told him yesterday afternoon. It said that Gu Xiaobo seemed to have contacted these two men, and at the same time, he also judged that these two men were also working for the Yin family. At that time, he was busy, so he did not pay attention to it. He did not expect that something would happen at night. So, now did he still need to find the backstage manipulator? Chapter 655. On purpose in an instant, Qin Sheng's anger was on the verge of exploding. He tried his best to control his emotions. They had gone too far. They had really gone too far. Since returning to Shanghai, Qin Sheng had not chosen to do anything to the Yin family. It was not that he did not want to take revenge, but there were too many things to do, and the Qin family was in danger. He did not want to fight on two fronts at once. However, the Yin family had challenged his bottom line again and again. They really treated him like a soft persimmon. No matter how good-tempered Qin Sheng was, he could not stand it. During this time, Qin Sheng had already started a plan. He wanted to wait until the Shanghai company's restructuring was completed before he went all out to deal with Yin Chaozong. Yin Chaozong actually colluded with them. How could Qin Sheng tolerate that? However, he did not expect that the Yin family would provoke him again. This time, they actually attacked Hao Lei, causing him to be so seriously injured. Now, it was unknown whether he was alive or dead. What should he do? Should he still wait? Should he still abide by the rules? In the past, Qin Sheng was not powerful and was bullied everywhere. He was like a stray dog. Now, Qin Sheng had the power. If he was bullied like before, what was the use of having all these? Therefore, this time, Qin Sheng chose to fight with them. No matter who they were, they had to pay the price. At most, he could give up everything. Chang Baji and Bao Fan were still on the way. Qin Sheng began to plan how to deal with the Yin family. He did not want to make a small fight, but to make the Yin family pay the price directly. Half an hour later, Chang Baji and Bao Fan arrived at the hospital and found Qin Sheng in an empty intensive care unit. They found that Qin Sheng was not in a good mood. They thought that he was too worried about Hao Lei. Qin Sheng snorted. "Don't look for the mastermind. I already know who it is." Chang Baji and Bao Fan were stunned at the same time. They did not expect that Qin Sheng would know the mastermind so soon. Qin Sheng was still blaming himself. Why did he not pay more attention when Hao Lei told him about it yesterday? Maybe he had put all his attention on the company's restructuring and wanted to suppress other things first. Moreover, Chang Baji and Bao Fan had already started a plan, and the Hangzhou side had also started. Therefore, he was to blame for everything. He was to blame for dragging this matter. If he had gone back to Shanghai and directly dealt with the Yin family, perhaps these things would not have happened. Chang Baji asked coldly, "Who? Other than the Yin family, it's still the Yin family," Qin Sheng said word by word. Right now, he really hated the Yin family to the core, especially Yin Chaozong. Chang Baji directly said, "You're courting death." Bao Fan knew that if Qin Sheng was serious, he might have to report to Master Qin. Moreover, he had to be prepared to clean up Qin Sheng's mess. Once the matter got out of hand and could not be settled by then, the Qin family had to be fully prepared. At least, they could not let Qin Sheng get into any accidents. Qin Sheng was very upset as he said, "It's all my fault. It's all my fault. Yesterday, Brother Lei told me those things, but I didn't take it to heart at all. If I had paid more attention, perhaps this would not have happened." Chang Baji did not care about this at all. He replied, "Qin Sheng, what has happened has happened. Let's not talk about this anymore. I just want to know what we should do now. Qin Sheng sneered and said, "What should I do? An eye for an eye." Therefore, in the next 2 hours, Qin Sheng, Chong Baji, and Bao Fan started to plan a counterattack against the Yin family in the study. This time, they had to deal with a lot of targets. The first one was the 2 men from last night. They were the direct murderers and had to pay the price. The second one was Gu Xiaobo. Gu Xiaobo had just met these 2 men yesterday. Something happened to Hao Lei at night. What else was there to explain? If Gu Xiaobo did not participate in it, nobody would believe it. Moreover, they had wanted to deal with Gu Xiaobo for a long time. This man should pay the price for his previous betrayal. The third one was Yin Chaozong and the Yin family behind him. Currently, Qin Sheng could only deal with Yin Chaozong. As long as he touched Yin Chaozong, the Yin family would immediately fight back. At that time, as long as they dared to touch him, it would be a matter of a higher level. While they were discussing, Yin Chaozong, who had been secretly paying attention to this side, finally got the exact news from the hospital. Hao Lei was seriously injured and unconscious. Now, it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Even if he woke up, it was estimated that he would have to stay in the hospital for a few months. Yin Chaozong had done what Shueko asked him to do, but he had to guard against Qin Sheng's revenge. Even though he did not know whether Qin Sheng had guessed that he was the mastermind behind the scenes, he still had to be careful, in case he was caught unprepared. Moreover, he had to involve Shueku and the others. He could not be the scapegoat at that time. In the open-air restaurant near the hotel, Shueku and Gu Yongning were having lunch. The other 2 were not present. Sitting here, they could overlook the Lujiazui opposite, which was a good location. Shueku was accompanied by a girl. Anyway, no matter where he went, he would not let himself be idle. His biggest hobby in this life was women. Otherwise, he would not have given Han Su and Qin Sheng a chance last time in Beijing. Shueku and his wife's way of getting along was very simple. They did not interfere with each other's freedom. But Shueku's only request to his wife was not to King cheat on him, let alone be discovered by him. Otherwise, she would be finished. When Yin Chaozong arrived, Shueku smiled and stood up. "Lao Yin, have you had lunch? Let's go together." "I've eaten at home. Let's talk business." Yin Chaozong refused with a smile and said directly. Shueku was very sensible and patted the shoulder of the woman beside him. "You go back to the room first. I have something to talk about." Although the woman was not full yet, she stood up and left sensibly. When she passed by Yin Chaozong, she did not forget to smile and nod to say hello. She did not complain about leaving because of Yin Chaozong's arrival. Her quality was not ordinary. No wonder so many single men desperately wanted to climb up, because as long as they climbed to a higher level, they would see a broader landscape, and they would be able to meet a better partner. Then they would have more choices in choosing a partner. After all, for most people, they could only find a woman who was like the kind of person they were. If you were capable, you could have several excellent women at the same time, provided that you could control them. There were too many such examples. After Yin Chaozong sat down, Shueku asked, "Tell me, what's the matter?" "I've done what you asked me to do. Last night, Qin Sheng's best friend, Hao Lei, was injured by my people and was hospitalized. The news from the hospital was that he had just finished an operation, but he is still in a coma. Even if he wakes up, he will have to rest for at least half a year," Yin Chaozong said truthfully. After Gu Yongning heard this, his eyes lit up and he said, "Shanghai's local tyrant is indeed different. You do things cleanly and efficiently." Shueku was also very happy. He had finally vented his anger a few days ago. Otherwise, every time he thought of what happened that night, he would feel very wronged. "Lao Yin, TSK. No wonder the outside world has such a high evaluation of you. You're amazing," Shueku also praised. Yin Chaozong did not play games with them. He said calmly, "I've done what I should do, but I have to prepare for the worst. Once Qin Sheng knows that I'm a mastermind behind this, he will settle old and new grudges together. At that time, you, my allies, better not let me be the scapegoat." Shueku laughed and said, "Lao Yin, how is that possible? Are we such people?" Yin Chaozong's words were too direct. Gu Yongning was more or less uncomfortable. He sneered and said, Chaozong, if we don't even trust each other, how can we continue to cooperate in the future? Yin Chaozong turned a blind eye to their reactions and replied, I'm just saying for the worst. Once Qin Sheng starts to settle accounts with me, we, the Yin family, will have to pay a price. You're very clear about that. At that time, don't blame me for dragging you down with me. Are you threatening me? Gu Yoning's expression changed slightly. Shueku was also a little uncomfortable. It was the first time that Yin Chaozong had such a tough attitude in front of them. Yin Chaozong replied casually, I'm not threatening you. How would I dare to threaten you? I'm just being too direct. I think there's no need for us to play games. Some things can be made clear. Although Gu Yoning was still a little uncomfortable, he could not help but admire Yin Chaozong's imposing manner. It was rare to see such a kind of peer. Shueku somewhat understood. Otherwise, he would not have chosen Yin Chaozong. He replied, Lao Yin, don't think so much. If Qin Sheng really starts to take revenge on your Yin family, of course, we will stand up. Moreover, I can't wait for him to take revenge on your Yin family. What do you mean? Yin Chaozong squinted and stared at Shueku. Shueku explained with a smile, Don't think too much. I didn't mean that. I'm just saying that if he acts recklessly in Shanghai, it will only speed up the Qin family's downfall. By that time, if the Qin family falls, what do you think Qin Sheng will be? Will he still be a threat to you in the future? Yin Chaozong was a smart man. He immediately understood. He smiled and said, I understand. Shueku stood up and held Yin Chaozong's hand as he said, Happy working with you. Soon, after talking about business, Yin Chaozong left the restaurant. Naturally, Qin Sheng's spies also witnessed everything and immediately reported to Qin Sheng. After Yin Chaozong got in the car, he looked back at the restaurant upstairs with a sneer at the corner of his mouth. Based on his intelligence, how could he not know that it seemed that he should not meet Shueku and the others at this time? Therefore, it could only be said that he did this on purpose. Even if Qin Sheng found out that he was the mastermind behind this, he would also think of Shueku and Gu Yoning. Moreover, Yin Chaozong had his own plans. In the hospital, after Qin Sheng received this news from Bao Fan, he immediately made a series of inferences. Since Yin Chaozong went to look for Shueku and Gu Yoning at this time, it could only be said that Shueku and Gu Yoning were involved in what happened last night. This was because Qin Sheng quickly thought of what had happened at the Bun Wharf some time ago. He had slapped Shueku and the others in the face hard. How could these arrogant rich playboys not be resentful? Therefore, it was very likely that they found Yin Chaozong and used him to kill people with a borrowed knife because they were now allies. Chapter 656. A strong counterattack after Qin Chang'an lent Bao Fan to Qin Sheng. Qin Sheng had a great advantage in terms of intelligence resources. Although Bao Fan was respectful in front of Qin Sheng, when he walked out of this ward, Bao Fan was a character that could make many tycoons in the Bun treat him with respect. Even if Boss Yi saw Bao Fan, he might not dare to fight with him directly. Bao Fan had many identities, but only a few people knew about his relationship with the Qin family. Therefore, Bao Fan was very clear about the principle that they were bound together, so he tried his best to help Qin Sheng. In fact, Bao Fan was also betting that if Qin Sheng could completely inherit everything from Qin Chang'an, his status would rise again in the future. This was his reward. Therefore, Bao Fan had been keeping a close eye on the Yin family, and he had also planted spies in the Yin family. This was his ability. Therefore, as soon as there was any movement on Yin Chaozong's side, Bao Fan would immediately get the news, especially this extremely important news at this moment. Qin Sheng, do you mean that Shueku was involved in what happened last night? They're taking revenge for the conflict that night? Bao Fan asked in a low voice. He did not expect that so many people would be involved. Qin Sheng frowned and said, I just suspect it, but I can't be sure. But I won't let them go. At least let them know that they can't bully me. Bao Fan nodded thoughtfully and said, Then I know what to do. I will definitely return the favor. Just wait for my news. Qin Sheng was afraid that the resources would be too scattered, so he reminded him, Well, you do as you see fit. I know you can control it, but our focus is still on the Yin family. I know, Bao Fan said in a low voice. Qin Sheng's eyes were gloomy, and he said, Then take action. I will wait for your news. This was a fierce battle, and also the beginning of Qin Sheng's strong counterattack. It was also the most direct collision between several forces. In the end, it was still unknown who would have a last laugh. Chang Baji and Bao Fan left one after another. At the same time, Chang Baji also took Yang Dainyu with him. At this time, Yang Dainyu's importance was highlighted. He could totally act alone. Qin Sheng continued to stay in a hospital and stayed by Hao Lei's side. He prayed silently, hoping that his brother, who had always supported him, could get through the danger safely. In the afternoon, Qin Sheng asked someone to send Han Bing away and let her go back to have a good rest. Otherwise, her body would not be able to take it. Moreover, she had just recovered from serious illness. If she collapsed at this time, Qin Sheng would really be too busy. After arranging everything, Bao Fan reported what had happened last night to Qin Chang'an. At the same time, he also reported Qin Sheng's next plan. Qin Chang'an did not say anything after hearing it, which made Bao Fan somewhat confused. Master Qin, aren't you going to persuade him? Bao Fan asked tentatively. Qin Chang'an said in a domineering manner, they have already bullied us. Why should I persuade them? Persuade Qin Sheng to take a step back? When had I, Qin Chang'an, ever been so cowardly? Besides, it's just a small fight. It won't cause any big waves. As long as those old fellows don't show up, I'll just watch the show. Moreover, Shanghai is the Zhu family's territory. I don't believe that they can tolerate it. I also don't believe that they won't help Qin Sheng. And I also want to take this opportunity to see how much support they have for Qin Sheng. Then I understand. After hearing this, Bao Fan smiled and nodded. He also knew what he should do. Otherwise, he would not feel confident. Qin Chang'an said casually, you just do your own thing. I'll keep an eye on other things. But if there's any movement, you must inform me in time. Okay, I understand, Bao Fan replied in a low voice. After hanging up the phone, Qin Chang'an stood up from the sofa in the office and walked slowly to the French window. Not far away, there was a piece of land that had not been developed. It was very conspicuous. After all, it was the World Trade Center. God knew how many people were drooling over it. When the land was auctioned, it was sold at a sky-high price of more than 10 billion yuan. But until now, it still had not started. Why? Because there was the shadow of the Chang and group in this land. The Chang group had always wanted to take it for themselves and then develop it, so no one could touch it. However, now this land could no longer be touched by the Chang and group. A few days ago, it had been transferred to someone else. The Chang and group had to bear with the pain and cut off the land. Qin Chang'an felt a little heartache. But nowadays, things like this were not rare. Qin Chang'an was really troubled. He was making concessions step by step. He was also trying hard to play and struggle for more time. But no one knew when everything would break out. When night came, everything seemed to be quiet again. Except for Qin Sheng, there was only a bodyguard of the Qin family in the hospital. After Lin Su got off work, she went to the hospital to accompany Qin Sheng. She did not even have dinner. All her thoughts were on Qin Sheng. After Qin Sheng knew that Lin Su did not have dinner, he asked the bodyguard to go out and buy some food. It was a few delicious vegetarian dishes and rice. The two of them ate slowly in the intensive care unit. There were too many things to do and too much pressure. Qin Sheng missed his life in Xiamen very much. It was so carefree and easy. Even though the road ahead was still unclear, he would not think about anything at that time. As long as Lin Su was by his side, it would be enough. However, he was afraid that he could not go back to those days anymore. Of course, Qin Sheng would also think about some things. For example, after Spring Breeze transferred it to the artistic young woman, was the business good? If not, would close down? And for example, his neighbor Annie Tang and her family of 3 were all right? Did Du Fei, who secretly loved him, get into a postgraduate school or graduated and started a job? Was Du Feng, the bad boy who always made trouble, obedient? In life, there would always be a lot of people. But also a lot of people would always be forgotten and lost. Many people would disappear unconsciously and inadvertently. When Han Bing came to the hospital, Qin Sheng and Lin Su were eating inside. She originally wanted to go in, but when she saw such a warm scene, she suddenly did not want to disturb them. It seemed that she was gradually giving up something deep in her heart. Therefore, after Han Bing asked the doctor about Hao Lei's situation, she secretly left. She knew that if there was anything, Qin Sheng would tell her. This night, Lin Su accompanied him to stand guard at night. No matter how Qin Sheng persuaded her to go back, Lin Su stubbornly insisted. In the end, Qin Sheng could only let her stay by his side. However, it did not take long for Lin Su to fall asleep. Qin Sheng covered her with the quilt and quietly guarded her, as well as the brother inside. As for what was happening outside, Qin Sheng did not know at all and did not care about it all. He had handed everything over to Chang Baji and believed that they could handle it well. For 2 consecutive days, Qin Sheng had been staying in the hospital, guarding Hao Lei closely. Some feelings, and some people were worth doing a lot of things for. Hao Lei was such a person. Qin Sheng did not go to Ruijin Hospital for a few days. The old lady was somewhat unhappy and muttered several times. Finally, Zhu Qingwen could not help but call Qin Sheng, asking him what he had been doing these days and why he did not come to the hospital. Qin Sheng felt a little guilty, but he could do nothing about it. Moreover, he did not want the Zhu family to know, so he hid it from Zhu Qingwen and said that he had something to do in the company and that he would go to the hospital tomorrow. Although Qin Sheng said so, Zhu Qingwen felt that something was wrong from his tone. Something must have happened, so she asked someone to inquire about it. After getting the exact news, Zhu Qingwen was shocked. She did not expect that such a big thing had happened. However, since Qin Sheng did not tell her, Zhu Qingwen did not take the initiative to expose him. Instead, she secretly watched Qin Sheng. On the one hand, she was worried that Qin Sheng would act impulsively. On the other hand, she was worried that Qin Sheng would have an accident. On the other hand, she also wanted to see what Qin Sheng would do. Anyway, Zhu Qingwen and Qin Chang'an had the same idea. No matter what Qin Sheng did, they would not persuade Qin Sheng to endure it. No matter the Qin family or the Zhu family, they were not the Zhu family and Qin family in the past. On the 3rd day, Chang Baji and Bao Fan, who had been planning for a long time, finally took action. The first to take action was not the Yin family or Yin Chaozong, but Shui Ku and Gu Yongning. This was also Bao Fan's idea. That night, Shui Ku and Gu Yongning went to a famous nightclub in Shanghai to drink. The guests were all rich playboys. They drank until 3 o'clock in the morning. In the end, the driver sent them back to the hotel. What they didn't know was that their route had already been calculated. When the car they were in arrived at a traffic light intersection, a red light flashed in front of them. When the car they were in came to a traffic light intersection, a Honda CR-V suddenly rushed out of the opposite direction and headed straight for them. Shui Ku and Gu Yongning, who were talking and laughing in the car, did not notice it at all. When the driver realized it and shouted to be careful, it was already too late. Chapter 657. Number 1 Suspect Master Qin had already given Bao Fan his bottom line, so there was nothing Bao Fan wouldn't dare to do. The Shui family and the Gu family were originally enemies who would not rest until one of them died. The two families had been fighting openly and secretly for so many years, so he was not afraid of adding some new hatred to the old. Moreover, after he came back, the Shui family and the Gu family provoked him one after another. They really looked down on the Qin family and were a bit too unscrupulous. If he did not fight back, he would be a bit stupid. Moreover, this was also a lesson for them, warning them to be sensible. Otherwise, they would be serious next time. Bao Fan had been watching Shui Ku and Gu Yongning for several days, looking for opportunities. When he knew that they were having fun in the nightclub tonight, Bao Fan immediately made a decision. Everything about this Honda CR-V was very clean, and the identity of the drunk driver was even more innocent. There was absolutely no mistake. Even if this car did not hit Shui Ku and Gu Yongning's car, it would be hit by other cars at the next intersection. For this reason, Bao Fan had made 3 preparations, and he was determined to win. The Honda CR-V ran the red light head-on. Even if the driver was immortal, it would be difficult for him to avoid it. He could only watch the out-of-control Honda CR-V crash into him. Shueku and Gu Yongning, who were already drunk, were also awakened by the driver's sudden scream. When they saw the out-of-control Honda CR-V, they were instantly dumbfounded. Their minds went blank, and they lost all space to think. There was only one thought in their minds. It's over. Bang! An ear-piercing crash resounded through the night sky. The other drivers on the road were startled and looked over at the same time. The two cars collided. The Honda CR-V knocked the Porsche Panamera several meters away, and the side of the car was more than half protruding. 3 people in the car, including the driver, were directly knocked out. The airbag also popped up at the same time. The drunk driver in the Honda CR-V also completely passed out. However, the Honda CR-V was not fast, so this was a control car accident. There would definitely be no deaths, but the injuries of both sides could not be controlled. Soon, the traffic police arrived in time, followed by the ambulance. The rest was a matter of procedure. Bao Fan did not sleep the entire night, waiting for the news. After confirming that the plan was complete, Bao Fan pursed his lips and smiled. This was just the beginning. There were more exciting things to come. In the hospital, Qin Sheng did not sleep because the doctor told him that tonight was the most dangerous time. If he could get through it, he would be fine. If not, he had to be prepared. Since yesterday, Hao Lei's body had shown signs of rejection. The doctors of the expert group had been busy the whole day, and Qin Sheng had not left the hospital at all. Therefore, when Qin Sheng received Bao Fan's call, he did not go to sleep. Before this, Bao Fan did not tell Qin Sheng about the specific implementation of the plan. He only told Qin Sheng what had happened after the plan was completed. After Qin Sheng heard this, he asked calmly, "No lives will be lost?" It was not that Qin Sheng did not dare to act recklessly. It was just that he had to be cautious now. He could not add fuel to the fire of the Qin family. Otherwise, the Qin family would be forced to face the counterattack of the Shui family and the Gu family. Within a controllable range, there won't be any problems. The driver is clean. No matter what they do, they won't be able to trace it back to us. Don't worry, Bao Fan replied confidently. If he could not do this, he would have wasted his time in Shanghai. Qin Sheng nodded and said, "Okay, that's good. Next, I'll wait for the news from the Yin family." After hanging up the phone, Qin Sheng walked out of the ICU and went to the entrance of the ICU. He looked at Hao Lei, who was still unconscious, through the window and said, "Brother, don't worry. None of them will be able to escape." At dawn, Han Bing had arrived at the hospital early. Qin Sheng had told her the specific situation yesterday, so she stayed until the wee hours before going back. After sleeping for a few hours, she hurried to the hospital again. At this moment, the two of them were standing at the entrance of the ICU ward, waiting for the doctor to come out. When the doctor came out, the two of them instantly became nervous. They did not even dare to breathe loudly. They stared at the doctor, waiting for the result. Looking at the two of them who were so nervous, the doctor smiled and said slowly, "The critical period is over. He can be transferred to the general ward. He should wake up in another 2 days. The next step is to slowly recuperate. If he wants to fully recover, it may take a year." Qin Sheng and Han Bing did not listen to the doctor's words at all. Just hearing the words, "the critical period is over," they were already overwhelmed with joy. Qin Sheng let out a long sigh of relief, completely relieved. Han Bing's face was full of tears. The pressure during this period was completely released. She subconsciously hugged Qin Sheng and sobbed softly. Qin Sheng patted her back and comforted her. "It's okay, it's okay." At this moment, in the mansion of Thompson First Class, Yin Xiaozong had just woken up. The nanny had already prepared breakfast. When he came out, he did not expect Feng He to be sitting in the living room. This made him a little surprised. "Feng He came so early. Did something happen?" Yin Xiaozong, who had just taken a shower, did not bother to change his clothes. He walked straight over and said in a deep voice, "What happened?" "Young master, at 3 o'clock last night, Shueku and Gu Yoning got into a car accident after drinking a TXX. Feng He tried to tell Yin Xiaozong in a very calm tone. Yin Xiaozong's face changed instantly. What? He did not expect to hear such explosive news as soon as he woke up. This was too King exciting. It made him completely awake in an instant. Feng He continued. Now, they just came out of the hospital and went to the Gu family's villa in Shishan to recuperate. Except for Shueke's moderate concussion, the others are not serious, but they still need to rest for a period of time. That's good. After listening, Yin Chaozong said quietly, "Did you find out who did it?" Feng He answered truthfully. The driver who caused the accident was drunk. He ran the red light and lost control of the car. The identity of the person who caused the accident is very ordinary. There is nothing special. But now they are still investigating. We have to wait for the specific results. This is Qin Sheng's counterattack. Yin Chaozong did not wait for Feng He to finish and directly concluded. He did not believe that this was just an accident. It could not be an accident. Moreover, during this period of time, they had been watching Qin Sheng. Except for Qin Sheng, who was still in the hospital looking after his best brother, Hao Lei, the others seemed to have suddenly disappeared. Was there really nothing fishy? Besides, such a big thing happened. Wouldn't Qin Sheng suspect them? If they really found out that they did it, wouldn't they take revenge? Everything had to be prepared for the worst, so that they could nip it in the bud. Since Qin Sheng dared to touch Shueku and Gu Yongning, why wouldn't he dare to touch him, the direct mastermind behind the scenes? Therefore, Yin Chaozong felt that it was better to be careful. Feng He frowned and said, "Young master, how can you be sure that this was done by Qin Sheng? If this is just an accident, then it's nothing. If it is not an accident, do you think there is anyone else in Shanghai besides Qin Sheng who has the possibility and courage to do this?" Yin Chaozong squinted and said. Feng He thought about it and felt that it was true. He then asked, "Then what should we do next?" Yin Chaozong said casually, "We should be careful these days. Don't take the initiative to get into trouble. Let them fight each other first. We will show up in the end. By the way, have those people been arranged?" Feng He laughed and said, "Young master, don't worry. I've handed it over to Gu Xiaobo and arranged for them to hide in Chongming Island. No one will find them." "Well, that's good. Later, come with me to see Shueku and the others," Yin Chaozong said casually. This was the most basic etiquette. Moreover, he really wanted to see how these domineering rich playboys looked like. It was interesting just thinking about it. In the purple garden of Shishan, Shueku and Gu Yongning, who had been frightened last night, had just returned to the villa. Su Bin, Gao Shi, and the two beauties who took care of Shueku and Gu Yongning were with them. Shueku and Gu Yongning were in a terrible state at the moment. Shueku's head was wrapped in bandages, and there were a few abrasions on his face with band-aids. Gu Yongning was in a similar state. Although there was no bandage on his head, his legs and arms were badly injured, and it hurt a little. Shueku was so angry that he couldn't bear to look at them. Shueku's head was wrapped in bandages, and there were a few abrasions on his face with band-aids. Gu Yongning was in a similar state. Although there was no bandage on his head, his legs and arms were badly injured, and it hurt a little. Gu Yongning was relatively calm, but his heart was still full of anger. If someone wanted to kill them last night, they would probably be separated by life and death. It could be said that they had a brush with death. Fortunately, the drunk driver's speed was not very fast. The man in charge of this matter said nervously, "We are continuing to investigate, but there is no problem with the current information. The man is just an ordinary office worker. Last night, after getting drunk with his friends, he insisted on driving home. He even quarreled with his friends for a while. There is no problem with the route home." F***CK, I don't believe it, Shueku replied directly. Gaoshi squinted and said, "Old Shue, you mean that someone did it on purpose? Who do you think it was? Qin Sheng?" Shueku replied, "Other than him, I really can't think of anyone else." Motherf***. After the car accident last night, and thinking of the incident some time ago, Shueku felt that he was really unlucky recently. What had happened to him? At this time, Gu Yongning replied, "If it is not an accident, then it can only be Qin Sheng, so we can only wait for the information." Gu Yongning and Yin Chaozong had the same thought. They both listed Qin Sheng as the #1 suspect. Su Bin echoed, "Brother Ning is right. This is the only possibility. Let's wait for Yin Chaozong to come and discuss the details. As for the movement on Qin Sheng's side, he must know more than us. Gu Yongning said with a gloomy look. Therefore, the contradiction between the two sides was almost open. No matter what the result was, the spearhead was pointed at each other. However, Qin Sheng could not care about them at this time. Bao Fan was the first heavy bomb, and Chong Baji was preparing the second one. Chapter 658. I'll go to Shanghai. Interestingly, Dr. Shui and Gu Yongning also went to Ruijin Hospital last night, but it was Luan branch of Ruijin Hospital. If they went to Ruijin Hospital, they might meet Qin Sheng, who was already in Ruijin Hospital at this moment. Hao Lei finally passed the critical period. The next step was to wait for him to wake up and recuperate. Qin Sheng could also go to do other things. He couldn't stay in a hospital all the time. Only Han Bing was left in the hospital. She also found 2 Annies and 2 bodyguards to accompany Hao Lei. Qin Sheng could rest assured that Hao Lei would be safe in the hospital. In Ruijin Hospital, Qin Sheng accompanied his grandmother. The old lady's complexion had recovered a lot. She could get out of bed and walk around. Wu Yajun would accompany her to take a walk outside every day. Otherwise, the old lady would ask to go back. The doctor dared not let her leave the ward now. After all, her condition had just stabilized. They had to observe her body every day. The most important thing was that her condition was suppressed by medication. Once the medication was stopped, there would be an accident. Zhu Qingwen came almost every day, sometimes in the morning and sometimes at night. Wu Yajun, her daughter-in-law, worked hard without complaint. She had already lost weight, but she never complained. Fortunately, there were caregivers with her, so she was not very tired. After all, Wu Yajun was older. At first, the old lady complained that Qin Sheng did not come recently. But when she saw her grandson, who looked extremely tired, she did not complain. Instead, she asked Qin Sheng if he did not have a good rest, did not eat well, or was too busy, and so on. Finally, all the complaints were transferred to Qin Chang'an. But the old lady did not say it out. She muttered in her heart that Qin Chang'an had tortured his grandson like this. Therefore, Qin Chang'an was inexplicably the scapegoat again. Anyway, he was used to it. He had never been treated well by the old lady for so many years. Qin Chang'an learned about the old lady's hospitalization from Qin Ran. Although he was busy with things in Beijing, Qin Chang'an still took the initiative to go to Shanghai to visit the old lady. But he did not come directly because the old lady did not agree. Therefore, Qin Chang'an called Zhu Qingwen first and asked a few questions tentatively. Unexpectedly, Zhu Qingwen directly refused and said that he would talk about it when the old lady was better. Qin Chang'an had to give up. Qin Sheng did not look very good. No matter how good his body was, he was still an ordinary person, not a steel machine. After working hard for a long time and eating and resting irregularly, he would naturally be tired. When Qin Sheng was about to leave, Zhu Qingwen happened to come over. She came over earlier today because she had nothing to do. So she came over early to accompany the old lady so that her sister-in-law could have a rest. Recently, Zhu Qingwen had pushed away almost everything. Other than going to Fudan University to attend classes, she stayed in the hospital. Her life was a lot more peaceful. When Qin Sheng was about to leave, Zhu Qingwen said that she was going out to buy something, so she walked with Qin Sheng for a while. She took the initiative to ask, "Sheng, are you in trouble? You don't look too good." Since Qin Sheng had chatted with Zhu Weigua and Zhu Changshen last time, he had known the bottom line and principles of the Zhu family. Consequently, he would not tell Zhu Qingwen about what had happened this time. He smiled and said, "Small Ann, I'm fine. I've been working overtime recently. I want to finish my business in Shanghai as soon as possible, so I'm a bit tired." Zhu Qingwen asked again, "Are you sure?" "Yes, I'm fine." Qin Sheng replied affirmatively again. Since Qin Sheng was unwilling to tell her, Zhu Qingwen did not intend to ask further. However, it did not mean that she did not care about Qin Sheng. She had been keeping an eye on Qin Sheng, just like Qin Chang'an. Once the Yin family or the other two families made any trouble, Zhu Qingwen would selectively take action. After Qin Sheng got in the car and left, Zhu Qingwen turned around and walked back. She sighed and roughly guessed the reason. She guessed that the last conversation had made Qin Sheng unwilling to tell her these things. On his way to the company, Qin Sheng received a call from Song Ruyu. During the days when Hao Lei was in trouble, Song Ruyu had called him several times, saying that she and her best friend wanted to invite Qin Sheng to dinner. She did not know when Qin Sheng would be free. Qin Sheng did not answer the first two calls. When the call went through for the last time, Qin Sheng politely refused, saying that he had been busy recently and that he would talk to her when he was free. Song Ruyu did not say anything. She only smiled and nodded. Qin Sheng did not contact her again until she returned to Beijing. Song Ruyu was somewhat disappointed. This time, she took the initiative to call Qin Sheng because she had met Sister Qin Ran at noon. They chatted happily and talked about some of Qin Sheng's things in Shanghai. So Song Ruyu cared about Qin Sheng. They chatted casually for a while. Song Ruyu asked when Qin Sheng would return to Beijing. She still owed him a meal. Qin Sheng said that he would go back after he was free and that he would charge her a big meal. Song Ruyu called Qin Sheng in the Sihiyuan of the old master. The old master had just gone to bed and was sitting in the yard in a daze. The weather in Beijing was gloomy today. It seemed that a heavy rain would come unexpectedly. The wind was blowing, which made people feel cool. After all, it was summer. At this time, Song Hushing appeared out of nowhere. He walked slowly to Song Ruyu and said, "What are you thinking about? You look like a love-struck fool." Song Ruyu rolled her eyes at Song Hushing and said, "You are the love-struck fool. Is Grandpa asleep?" Song Hushing asked casually. Of course, he knew the old master's work and rest habits. Today, he mainly came to see Song Ruyu. Song Ruyu nodded and said, "Aren't you busy these days? Why do you have time to visit Grandpa?" "No matter how busy I am, I have to visit Grandpa. Moreover, my most lovely and beautiful sister is back. How can I not come?" Song Hushing said half-jokingly. He had a kind of elegant temperament, which made people feel that he was calm and wise. No wonder so many people had high hopes for him. Song Ruyu curled her lips, but she was quite happy. This brother of hers had been very good to her since she was a child and always protected her. Although they always quarreled, they were very close to each other. "Let me tell you something happy." Song Hushing suddenly changed the topic. Song Ruyu asked curiously, "What is it?" "When in Shanghai, didn't Shueku and Gu Yoning bully you and your best friend? Last night in Shanghai, they had a car accident and were badly injured." "It was karma," Song Hushing said slowly. He had been told this by someone on the phone at noon. Song Ruyu was very unhappy and said, "Did you do it?" Although she had explained to Song Hushing on the phone that day that she did not want to get involved in too many things, she also knew her brother's temper. If she really provoked him, he would definitely take revenge. Song Hushing sneered and said, "I'm not that bored. But what happened that night will not end like this. When I go back to Beijing, I will settle the score with them." "Brother, don't mess around. It was really nothing that night. I was not angry." "Why are you angry?" Song Ruyu was relieved when she heard that it had nothing to do with Song Hushing, but she was still worried about him. Song Ruyu was sitting on the swing. Song Hushing had nothing to do, so he helped her push the swing. Then he said, "You are used to standing aloof from worldly affairs. Maybe nothing matters in your eyes, but I can't. But don't you want to ask who had anything to do with her car accident?" Song Ruyu originally wanted to refute, but she was attracted by Song Hushing's words. Obviously, there was a hidden meaning in his words. She asked, "What do you mean? Who had something to do with it?" "I have absolutely reliable news." I quoted an authoritative person close to Shueku and Gu Yoning. He said that it had something to do with Qin Sheng. Song Hushing said truthfully. It had to be said that Song Hushing had a powerful network. He had gotten a first-hand news so quickly. Song Ruyu was subconsciously stunned for a moment when she heard that it had something to do with Qin Sheng. She frowned and said, "How could it have something to do with Qin Sheng?" Song Hushing shrugged. He was not interested in these trivial things. He just explained, the Qin family, the Shui family, and the Gu family are like fire and water. You definitely don't know this. The elders of the Qin family fought fiercely in the past. These years, they have been in conflict constantly, so it is normal that the juniors can't even get along with each other. Song Ruyu thought of what had happened that night. It seemed that she could understand what Song Hushing was talking about. It was just that she really didn't know about those old grudges. No wonder Qin Sheng had been so impulsive that night. It turned out that the two sides had been enemies for a long time. Song Ryu thought that Qin Sheng had been busy these days. Could it have something to do with these people? She was somewhat worried and asked, "Is Qin Sheng okay?" Song Hushing said in a strange tone, "Wow, nothing happened. You're already helping an outsider. I thought you were not worried about anything. It turns out that there is something else you are worried about." Song Hushing, "Can't you speak properly?" Song Ryu said somewhat angrily. Song Hushing quickly put away his cynical look, fearing that he would really make Song Ryu angry. He said very seriously, "Qin Sheng is fine, but something happened to one of his friends. I don't know how it happened. Anyway, it took Qin Sheng 10 hours to save his life in the hospital a few days ago. Qin Sheng has been in the hospital recently. I don't know what's going on now, but an authoritative person said that it might have something to do with Shui Ku and Gu Yoning." After Song Hushing finished speaking, Song Ryu instantly became nervous. She finally understood why Qin Sheng had not answered her calls at the beginning. Later, when Qin Sheng had answered the call, he had said that he was very busy. At that time, she could hear that Qin Sheng's voice was a little tired. So that was what had happened. That night when you were in Shanghai, when Qin Sheng went to pick you up, he had a conflict with Shui Ku and Gu Yoning and even fought with them. You know all about this. Based on those people's tempers and wits, how could they tolerate it? So they guessed that what happened to Qin Sheng's friend was their revenge, and that the car accident between Shui Ku and Gu Yoning was Qin Sheng's revenge. This is going to be a drama, Song Hushing said, as if he was watching a drama. Anyway, he did not like both sides, so he could do whatever he wanted. Moreover, this matter had not been put on the table. It was just everyone's guess. If it was really put on the table, it would be interesting because then the elders should come forward. At this time, Song Ryu did not care about these things anymore because she had fallen into deep self-blame. She subconsciously took all the responsibility. If what Song Hushing said was true, then it was really her fault. If she had not asked Qin Sheng to pick her up that night, there would not have been a conflict between them. If there had not been a conflict between them, Qin Sheng's friend would not have been in the hospital, and these things would not have happened. Therefore, Song Ryu said directly, "Tell Grandpa that I'm going to Shanghai." After saying that, Song Ryu stood up and hurried out without even taking her bag. Song Hushing was shocked. He did not expect that Song Ryu would have such a big reaction. Chapter 659. Song Hushing was just an onlooker. Although the Qin family and the Song family had been friends for generations, and Qin Chang'an had helped them a lot when he had just started his business. That was many years ago. As Qin Chang'an's business grew bigger and bigger, the Song family gradually kept a distance from the Qin family. The old master had a good sense of direction in this regard. This sense of distance did not mean that they were estranged. It was just that they did not have too much involvement with the Qin family in some matters. Even so, there were still rumors about the relationship between the Qin family and the Song family, which was inevitable. The Song family and the Qin family took different paths. As the Qin family's business got bigger and bigger, the Song family had to keep a distance from the Qin family. Otherwise, the younger generations of the Song family would face more resistance if they went further. Moreover, the old master was so old that he didn't want to be stained with any stains. The second generation of the Song family didn't have any great achievements. The old master put all his hopes on the third generation. While he was still alive, he wanted to help them take a few more steps. Then he would take a few more steps. Therefore, the old master had not said anything about the Qin family until now. Moreover, the relationship of the interest group represented by the Qin family was too complicated, which had long been beyond the old master's control. Naturally, the old master would not get involved in it. Therefore, the Song family and the Qin family could only be said to be friends of gentlemen. They had contacts but no interests. The two members of the second generation of the Song family did not have much contact with Qin Chang'an, especially after the marriage between Song Hushing and Qin Ran failed. The relationship between Song Hushing and Qin Ran was a bit complicated. Song Hushing liked Qin Ran at first, but Qin Ran never considered marriage. Song Husheng finally stayed away and did not have much contact with Qin Ran. Song Ruyu was more familiar with Qin Ran, and now she was closer to Qin Sheng. When a matter of the Qin family became more and more serious, Song Husheng felt lucky that he did not get together with Qin Ran. Otherwise, the Song family would have to get involved even if they did not want to. He and the Qin family could only be tied together. If something happened to the Qin family, his future would basically be ruined. Therefore, after knowing the old master's thoughts, Song Husheng naturally did not want his sister to have anything to do with Qin Sheng. It was estimated that the entire Song family, except for the old master, had such thoughts. However, old master was determined to keep his promise, and no one in the Song family could do anything about it. Most importantly, Song Ruyu was also inclined to do so. This gave Song Husheng a huge headache. Fortunately, after what happened in Shanghai, Song Husheng learned a lot of things, especially that thing, which made him feel very lucky because he knew his sister very well. If his sister knew about it, she would definitely cut off all contact with Qin Sheng. If his grandfather knew about it, he would not stop them at all. Of course, Song Husheng had to stop Song Ruyu from going to Shanghai. He hurriedly ran out and grabbed Song Ruyu, saying, "Ruyu, what are you doing? What does it have to do with you? It's just a grudge between them. Don't force yourself to take the blame." Song Ruyu insisted, but if it hadn't happened that night, they wouldn't have quarreled like this. "It has something to do with me. I think you're worried about Qin Sheng," Song Husheng said angrily. Song Ruyu said calmly, "It has nothing to do with me, but it's all because of me. If I don't show up, do you think it's the right thing to do?" Song Husheng was about to blurt out that thing, but he suddenly changed his mind. He felt that if he took the initiative to say it, it would not be as shocking as Song Ruyu seeing it with her own eyes or hearing it from her own mouth. Therefore, Song Husheng snorted and said, "Fine, go ahead." Song Ruyu felt that Song Husheng was a little strange today, but she could not tell what was strange about him. She stared at Song Husheng for a while, and finally turned around and walked into the Sihiyuan. Song Husheng was a little surprised. "You're giving up so soon?" Song Ruyu stared at him and said, "Who said that? I'm going back to get my bag. My ID card and cell phone are still in it." Song Husheng was speechless. Sometimes this sister of his really made him feel helpless. But he could not deny that this sister was too outstanding, even more outstanding than him. In the future, her achievements might not be lower than his. Therefore, Song Husheng had always thought that no man could match up to his sister, at least not yet. Qin Sheng was not worthy of her. Today, in the Qin family Sihiyuan, there was a distinguished guest who was also Qin Chang'an's acquaintance. He was the director of the Chang and group, the man called Sixth Brother by Qin Chang'an and Zhao Anji. The summer rain had not arrived, and a cool breeze was blowing. In the yard, two men of about the same age were drinking erguo and talking cheerfully, but every word was mixed with the shadow of a sword. They were not as calm as they looked on the surface, and the atmosphere was not so harmonious. Except for the two men, there was no one else in the whole yard. The bodyguards and servants of the Qin family were all forbidden to enter. Only Gong's son stood at the door of the main hall to serve them. Qin Chang'an drank a cup of wine to drown his sorrows, and said in a sad and funny tone, "Sixth brother, we have known each other for decades. I followed you since we were children. Do you really want to force my brother to this step?" During this period, Qin Chang'an's hair was getting whiter and whiter. In the past, when his hair was a little gray, he would dye it. Recently, he did not even have time to do so, so he showed his true colors. Therefore, when people saw the current Qin Chang'an, they would sigh that this once arrogant man was really old. The old man, who was a few years older than Qin Chang'an and would be 70 years old after the Spring Festival, let out a long sigh and said, "Chang'an, do you really think that I, your brother, forced you to do this?" "Sixth brother, I know what you are thinking. But has it really come to this? If you are willing to go through hardships together, you will not be in this situation now," Qin Chang'an replied with a snort. Brother Six shook his head helplessly and said, "Chang'an, for any of us, this is the best ending. You have to be considerate of us. It's not that we don't want to do it, but what do you think will happen if we do it?" "I don't know. I only know that you want to abandon the rook to save the king, and let me clean up this mess. I have done my best. I am the one who bears all the hardships, and I am the one who will be the scapegoat in the end. What do you want to think? Qin Chang'an laughed. Sixth brother squinted and said, Don't we want to do it? If we don't want to do it, we may not be able to survive until now. We have been working hard at the beginning, and no one is willing to give up all of this. But what is the result? The more we challenge the bottom line of the higher-ups, the more difficult our situation is. That is why we have today's ending. I am very disappointed, Qin Chang'an said with a bitter smile. Everything that had come to this point was not what they wanted to see. But when it really came to this, they could only consider their own position and interests. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. If they did not want to be crushed to death, they could only think of ways to save themselves. That was why Sixth Brother made such a choice. If we really want to blame someone, we can only blame ourselves for developing too crazily. Now that we have become the target of everyone, do you think it is possible for us to land safely? No one can resist the general trend. We can only go with the flow. It is obvious that the higher-ups want to kill the chicken to scare the monkey. If we still want to resist stubbornly, the result will be total annihilation. We will have nothing left. When Sixth Brother said these words, he was also very sincere. But these words were no longer important, so it did not mean that he would continue to do so. Qin Chang'an sneered and said, If they can make it, why can't I? Because you are Qin Chang'an, and because you're standing much higher than them. Let me say something unpleasant. Do you also want to die a violent death like that person? Sixth Brother's expression changed slightly, and he said very seriously. Today, he had come to find Qin Chang'an, which represented their final showdown. If Qin Chang'an still wanted to persist to the end, then they really could not blame him. Qin Chang'an's expression changed instantly. He stood up abruptly and said, Sixth Brother, are you threatening me? Sixth Brother shook his head and smiled bitterly. He stood up slowly and patted Qin Chang'an's shoulder. He said, Chang'an, don't be so sensitive. How can I threaten you? Moreover, I'm not that kind of person. I am just saying the worst-case scenario, so that you can be prepared. Qin Chang'an stared at this big brother, who had been unreliable in the past. In the end, he did not say a word. He just turned directly to the main hall, and then said to Gong Sun, See the guest out. Gong Sun walked over somewhat awkwardly and said to Sixth Brother, Sixth Brother, I am sorry. Let me see you out. They shed all pretenses of cordiality. Sixth Brother stood there and looked at Qin Chang'an, who had already gone far away. He pondered for a few seconds. He did not expect that Qin Chang'an would do this. Why did he have to do this? Everyone thought that this was the best ending, but why did he not admit it? Did it really become the worst ending? For everyone except Qin Chang'an, it was the best ending. However, no matter how domineering Sixth Brother was, he would not do this. After all, after so many years of relationship, it really could not go that far. But it did not mean that others would not do this. Everyone knew that the Chang and group had been selling their assets recently, especially those overseas assets that they had forcefully bought. Many people also knew that the China Banking and Insurance Regulatory Commission had been keeping a close eye on the Chang and group's banking and insurance assets. Especially today, the central bank had criticized some problems of the Chang and group, especially the transfer of assets. Therefore, the Chang and group and Qin Chang'an were pushed to the forefront again. In the end, Brother Six still left. He did not look for Qin Chang'an to discuss anything with him. After he left, the storm, which had been brewing for a long time, finally arrived. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Qin Chang'an, who was sitting in the study, lit a cigarette. However, he did not take a puff for a long time. In the temple on Mount Wutai, which used to be extremely shabby and was only slightly renovated now, the heavy rain also hit. The old monk, who had hidden his name, was chanting Buddhist scriptures. But the lightning and thunder outside had already covered his voice. It was a loud bang. Suddenly, an extremely ear-piercing muffled thunder resounded in the sky, resounding through the whole earth and frightening many people. The Buddha beads in the old monk's hand were broken. Chapter 660. The vixen. This massive downpour had engulfed the entire northern China region. The sky was covered by dark clouds, making it extremely gloomy. Everyone's mood was a little heavy. It was estimated that many cities' municipal systems would be paralyzed again. Who knew how many people would not be able to return home tonight? The rain was getting heavier and heavier, forming a thick curtain of rain that covered the sky. The old monk in the shabby temple suddenly felt a little heavy after his Buddha beads broke. This was not a good sign. The old monk seemed to feel that an uninvited guest had come. He did not pick up the Buddha beads. He slowly got up and walked to the door of the main hall. The rain was too heavy, and the visibility was very low. The old monk could not see the strange man who walked into the temple alone with an umbrella. In the end, he smiled bitterly and shook his head helplessly. He had been away from the world for so many years, but it seemed that he could not escape the karma at all. It was good to be pure and to cultivate in seclusion. It was too difficult to be alone. You did not get involved in karma, but karma came for you. How could you solve the problem? Continue to run away from everything and live a secluded life of cultivation, or give up the ascetic meditation that he had cultivated for decades and go back to the world to join in the evil. One flower, one world. One leaf, one Bodhi. Every choice had a different karma. Every choice was a different world. But there was only one choice in life, and only one result could be seen. Outside the temple, 2 SUVs that came from afar were surrounded by a curtain of rain. Everyone else was already hiding in the cars. The old man who was holding the umbrella walked inside unhurriedly. Even though he was holding the umbrella, the heavy rain drenched his clothes and shoes. The little monk at the entrance of the temple hurriedly went forward and bowed. "Benefactor, it's such a heavy rain. Are you looking for someone or taking shelter from the rain?" In the side hall of the temple, after hearing the noise outside, the head monk opened his eyes slightly and then closed them again. He turned a deaf ear to what was happening outside. It seemed that he was already used to it and had a premonition of many things. "I'm looking for someone to take shelter from the rain," the man whose face was covered by the umbrella replied in a very deep voice. However, the man's legs were not nimble, and he seemed to be old. The little monk was a little confused, but he could only continue to ask, "Benefactor, who are you looking for?" "Qin Changxing." The man said the real name of the old monk in the main hall straightforwardly. The little monk knew it was the old monk's real name, but the old monk had refused many people, so he was about to decline politely. Unexpectedly, the man did not care whether the little monk agreed or not and went straight inside. The little monk was a little anxious. He hurriedly followed and shouted, "Benefactor, hey, I haven't let you in yet. How can you do this?" The temple wasn't big. Hence, when the old monk, who had already walked out of the main hall, saw this scene, he immediately waved his hand at the little monk, indicating that there was no need for him to bother. Only then did the little monk mumble a few words and leave. The man holding the umbrella stopped outside the main hall. He kept a distance of 2 meters from Qin Chang'an. He did not walk up the stairs, nor did he lift the umbrella. The man in the rain asked in a deep voice, "It's been more than 20 years. Haven't you had enough of such a life?" "This is my life, so how can I have enough?" the old monk said calmly. However, he was still thinking about the Buddhist bead breaking, and his head hurt. "Do you think I don't know what others don't know? Have you really been cultivating in seclusion for 20 years? Even if I believe you, I won't believe the old master." "It's up to you whether you believe me or not," the old monk said in the same tone. The man with the umbrella suddenly said, "Changxing, it's time to come out of seclusion. Don't let the Qin family repeat the same mistakes. Don't forget what the old master told you." "It's not time yet," Qin Changxing replied. When the prayer beads broke, he knew that some things couldn't be calculated against the old man. All of this was destined many years ago. The man with the umbrella smiled and said nothing, as if he had gotten the answer he deserved. Then he turned around and left with a smile. He came in a hurry and left in a hurry. As for who he was, no one knew. Undercurrents were surging in Beijing, and everything was unpredictable. In Shanghai, the most direct confrontation was to see who was more powerful. After seeing Shui Ku and Gu Yongning's embarrassed look, Yin Xiaozong really wanted to laugh, but he held it back. These two rich playboys had never been treated like this before. It was so horrible that they probably didn't want to go out for a while. Therefore, Yin Xiaozong could also feel the anger in the hearts of these two people. Now, they just lacked a reasonable reason. If they really found out that it was Qin Sheng's side who made the move, then it was estimated that their revenge would be even more ferocious. Yin Xiaozong could not wait for them to fight. It would be better if they could turn the world upside down. Old Yin, you're the local tyrant in Shanghai. I have limited resources here. Help me find a way, even if you have to use special means. You must find out who the F***CK came to Detroit, Shueka shouted loudly. Yin Xiaozong said calmly, Don't worry, I'm already taking action. I won't let you down. Shueka said again, Qin Sheng, it had better not be you. Otherwise, I will never let you go. Let's see who will laugh in the end. Gu Yongning didn't say anything. He felt that it was most likely Qin Sheng. Now, they were just being unreasonable. If they really found evidence, it would be interesting. Qin Sheng didn't bother to think about what they were thinking. He dared to do this time because he was not afraid of the consequences. After leaving the hospital, Qin Sheng went directly to the company. There were a lot of things waiting for him to settle. However, as soon as he arrived at the company, he received a piece of bad news. That was, the board of directors in Beijing sent a young woman in her 30s to be responsible for the reorganization of the Shanghai company. She was also Qin Sheng's assistant. At the same time, she was also to monitor whether Qin Sheng had any unreasonable or illegal operations in the process of reorganization. Qin Sheng originally thought that she was a helper, but Zhongshan told him that this woman came with bad intentions. Obviously, she was looking for trouble. They had gone over several times. Qin Sheng more or less understood what was going on. He estimated that this was not the intention of Qin Chang'an, but the intention of some hostile forces who didn't want to see him go too smoothly. Although she was a woman, if she stood on the opposite side of him, Qin Sheng would not be polite. He would go back the way he came. Just as Qin Sheng sat in the office, Yin Pan had just sent the backlog of documents over. This woman walked into the office. She was not bad-looking, dressed in jewelry, and had a good figure. However, she had a coquettish aura, which made people unable to look at her directly. Qin Sheng really wondered how she had climbed to that position. Oh, Director Qin, I finally see you. I've been in Shanghai for a few days, but I haven't seen you show up. Didn't the board of directors inform you that I'm coming? Or do you have something against me and don't want to see me? We can have a good chat. The woman called Fang Fei walked in front of Qin Sheng with cat-like steps. Yin Pan felt a little disgusted when she swayed her buttocks. However, for the other men in the company, it was a feast for the eyes. The woman seemed to be doing it on purpose. This was originally her advantage. Qin Sheng squinted and said, Do we know each other? Then he shouted at Yin Pan. Yin Pan, who is this woman? Do you have an appointment? Fang Fei said a lot, but was rebutted by Qin Sheng with such a simple sentence. Qin Sheng directly showed his attitude. Don't play tricks in my territory, I won't fall for it. Yin Pan was very cooperative and said, Director Qin, I forgot to tell you, this is Miss Fang Fei sent by the Beijing Board of Directors. Zhongshan, who stood at the door and did not come in, laughed happily. Fang Fei could point fingers in front of these people, but if she dared to mess around in front of Qin Sheng would definitely make her suffer. After all, Qin Sheng was the group's director and the crown prince. Who did she think she was? If Fang Fei only had this little bit of ability, she would not have been sent to Shanghai to stir up trouble. It should be known that this appointment was the result of the open and secret struggle of the board of directors. Even Qin Chang'an could only nod his head. Otherwise, it would only let those directors and shareholders think that the Chang and group was his family's world. Therefore, Fang Fei laughed out loud. Her chest was even more limitless. Who asked her to dress so sexily? A low-cut V-neck top and a tight skirt perfectly showed off her body advantage. It was estimated that many young people in the company had fallen head over heels for her. Oh, Director Qin, you really know how to joke. I guess you have been too busy recently, so I didn't want to disturb you. Now you should know who I am, right? Fang Fei leaned over Qin Sheng's desk, revealing a large area of snow-white chest, and said with smiling eyes. If Qin Sheng did not have this self-control, he was afraid that he would have already fallen for her. However, in terms of women, Qin Sheng had already established an invincible golden body. What kind of demons and ghosts had he not seen? Therefore, Qin Sheng did not hide it. He stared at Fang Fei's chest unscrupulously and said lecherously, "So that's how it is. I almost forgot about this. Sister Fang should be much bigger than me. Yes, I think it should be very big. It's not too much for me to call you Sister Fang, right?" Qin Sheng was blatantly flirting with her. Fang Fei was afraid that Qin Sheng would not take the bait. The more Qin Sheng acted like this, the happier she was. Someone had already said that if she could make Qin Sheng fall for her, he would directly give her a villa worth 20 million. This temptation was big enough, so she made up her mind. Fang Fei covered her mouth and laughed. She deliberately let her chest surge and said, "Then I won't call you Director Qin. It's too formal. I'll call you brother. As long as Sister Fang is happy." Qin Sheng laughed and said. Fang Fei said happily, "Oh, brother, you really know how to talk. Let's not talk about work today. Brother, do you have time tonight? Sister will treat you to a meal." There would be more opportunities if they had more contact. Therefore, Fang Fei took the initiative to invite him. If they drank too much, there would be more opportunities. She did not believe that Qin Sheng would not give her face. However, Qin Sheng did not give her face and replied, "Oh, sister, I don't think I can today. There are too many things recently. After these 2 days, I will treat you, sister. Is that okay?" Fang Fei's face changed slightly. No matter how nice it sounded, it was nothing without practical action. However, since Qin Sheng had already said so, if she continued to insist, it would be a little too enthusiastic. Therefore, Fang Fei smiled and said, "Then I will listen to brother." Qin Sheng nodded and lowered his head to look at the documents. Fang Fei knew that he meant to send her off. She exhaled and said, "Then brother, do what you need to do. I will look for you later. I hope we can cooperate well in the future." After saying that, Fang Fei turned around and left. The sound of her high heels was crisp and sweet. With this ability, it would be a bit of a waste if she did not become a model. After Fang Fei left, Qin Sheng raised his head. The conversation just now really made him feel disgusted, not to mention Yin Pan and Zhong Shan. Yin Pan was directly called a vixen. Qin Sheng laughed. He was afraid that there would be a lot of crossfire with Yin Pan in the future because they were not the same kind of people. Zhong Shan said disapprovingly, "She is not friendly." Qin Sheng sneered and said, "She is just a small character. If she finds trouble with you in the future, directly push all the blame to me. Let me fight with her." Chapter 661. To lose one's senses. Qin Sheng was so busy and tired recently that he didn't receive many calls. Even if he saw them, he would forget to return them, let alone WeChat messages. No wonder he didn't know about it. After all, his focus was on the hospital. First, Sheng Jing suddenly resigned, and Beijing quickly agreed. Then, Fang Fei parachuted into Shanghai. Qin Sheng would never believe that there were no internal enemies. When a disaster came, everyone flew away. Chong and fell into the most serious crisis in history. At the beginning, when there was a hole in the ship, everyone might work together to get through the crisis. But when the hole became bigger and bigger, to the point where the ship was about to sink, no one was willing to stay on the ship and sink with it. They all tried to think of ways to survive. Most of them wanted to take the ship's assets with them before they left. This was the truth and the reality. Qin Sheng was very clear that the board of directors, which represented the interests of all parties, seemed to be harmonious, but in fact, there must be constant fighting. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many problems. However, he didn't know these things yet. Qin Chang'an never intended to tell him. Even his sister rarely mentioned it. Of course, Qin Sheng couldn't care or do anything about it. He didn't have the ability to take care of these things, as long as the old man knew. In the office, Qin Sheng was lost in thought. Fang Fei was definitely not as simple as she looked. He didn't believe that this woman only relied on her body to get to this position. Otherwise, she would be parachuted into Shanghai with high hopes, so there would be a lot of trouble. However, Qin Sheng had already thought of a countermeasure. Zhongshan was still in charge of the specific things. When it was time to fight, he could push all the responsibility to him. This woman wouldn't fall out with him. Moreover, he didn't have that ability. It was difficult to make time. Qin Sheng had to work overtime tonight. Yin Pan and Zhongshan were used to it. Anyway, when Qin Sheng left, they would leave. After night fell, the neon lights of these buildings in Lujiazui lit up the night sky as if it were daytime. Most of the buildings were still brightly lit. If one wanted to stand on this land, how could it be possible without putting in several times the effort of ordinary people? After working continuously for a few hours, Qin Sheng finally got up and took a break. Yin Pan made him a cup of coffee to refresh him. Otherwise, Qin Sheng would not be able to hold on. If he were to sleep now without thinking about anything, he could probably sleep for 2 days and 2 nights. Holding the coffee in his hand, he ended the call with Lin Su. However, his thoughts were on Chang Baji and the rest. He wondered how they were doing. Shui Ku and Gu Yongning stopped there. After all, too many people were involved. They would deal with them when they had enough time. They would deal with the Yin family first. Back on Chongming Island, Chang Baji and Yang Dainiu had been guarding the farmhouse for a few days now, but there was no sign of activity from those people. They ate, drank, defecated, and slept inside. They could not just barge in, could they? According to the information provided by Bao Fan, there were a total of 5 extraordinary martial artists inside, including Gu Xiaobo. If they just rushed in like this, it would be strange if they didn't turn the place upside down. At that time, no one would want to see the commotion. Therefore, they could only split up and attack, and the easiest one to attack was naturally Gu Xiaobo. Since Gu Xiaobo's betrayal, he had been living a free and easy life. If not for Hao Lei, they probably wouldn't have attacked that woman. However, since Gu Xiaobo was involved in this matter, he couldn't blame them for not following the rules. Of course, they had a bottom line. In a car, Chang Baji looked at the time and said to Yang Dainiu, "Dainiu, it's almost time for you to go. They've already taken action. I'll inform you as soon as I get the news." Yang Dainiu had been suffering in this desolate place for a few days. He had already cursed Gu Xiaobo thousands of times. Moreover, this guy was the culprit who killed Gu Qingyang. Today, he was going to kill this evil for his sect. "Then I'll wait for senior uncle's news," Yang Dainiu said with a smile. Then he got out of the car slowly. In the Xinyiandi shopping center in Shanghai, a woman in a maternity dress was strolling alone in the stores. Most of the stores she went to were related to babies. Sometimes she stopped and lingered. Sometimes she talked and laughed with the shop assistants. It seemed that she didn't have any pressure at all. Originally, the woman was very beautiful. After she was pregnant, she became more elegant. Every time she went to a store, the shop assistants would praise her beauty and so on. The woman also enjoyed this kind of praise. Now, she didn't have many thoughts. She just waited for the birth of the baby in her belly quietly. Now, she had a nanny and a driver to take care of her every day. Apart from going shopping, she would go to concerts or watch plays. When she was in a bad mood, she would ask some friends to come to her house to chat and make fun of them. She had clothes to wear and food to eat. Every ordinary woman would envy such a comfortable life. However, what kind of life had she been living a year ago? She rented a single apartment with all kinds of people. Every day, she slept during the day and went to work at night. She left at 6 o'clock in the evening and went home at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning with exhaustion and the smell of alcohol. Sometimes, she even got drunk. The most important thing was that she had to deal with all kinds of different men at work. It was fine if she met a man who was pleasing to the eye or polite. If she met a man who was extremely annoying, she would be really unlucky. She had long been tired of that kind of life, but she couldn't do anything to change it. Because this world was very realistic. It was difficult to do anything without money, let alone a girl like her. If she didn't have the ability and still wanted to earn more money, she naturally had to sacrifice something. How could she let everything go as she wished? After all, in today's society, Ordinary men were more difficult to earn money, let alone a woman like her who had nothing but beauty. However, although she wanted to work there, she had never been in public. This was the only thing she could leave for herself. Otherwise, she was afraid that she would completely degenerate and eventually lose herself. Then, unexpectedly, when she met the man named Gu Xiaobo, the trajectory of her life was changed. She didn't have to go to work anymore. She didn't have to deal with those men anymore. She could live and fall in love like a normal person every day. Until now, she still didn't understand why such an outstanding man liked her. This made her very puzzled at the beginning. After all, there were many women who were more beautiful than her in that place. Moreover, he must have seen other women who were more outstanding and more beautiful. More importantly, her identity was her biggest pain point. It was an unavoidable fact. However, he liked her so much and began to pursue her crazily. In the end, she could only nod and agree because she was also a little tired. She wanted to find a man who really liked her to rely on. Moreover, this man had status, ability, and a certain financial foundation. It turned out that her vision was not wrong. Not to mention how good this man was to her. He completely spoiled her. As long as it was within the scope of his ability, he could almost satisfy her. Secondly, as the man's career continued to develop, her life also became better and better. When did she ever want to have such a life in Shanghai? Therefore, she was very satisfied. She now wanted to give birth to a child for him and live a life of supporting her husband and children. This should be her life for the rest of her life. Sometimes, she would even think about whether it was the setbacks and hardships in the first half of her life that allowed her to accumulate the luck and fortune she had today. It was already too late, and she was a little tired from shopping, so she prepared to go home to rest. Otherwise, Gu Xiaobo would definitely be angry when he called. She knew that Gu Xiaobo had been busy and tired recently, so she didn't want to worry too much. She called the driver, who was waiting for her by the roadside. As soon as she left the baby shop and was about to go out, she felt that something was wrong. It was as if a man had been following her. She had noticed it when she was in the shop in front of her. The woman frowned slightly, feeling a little uneasy. She quickly walked down the escalator, but the man was still following her. This made her more and more nervous. Did she meet some bad guy? Therefore, she quickened her pace, thinking that everything would be fine as long as she got in the car, even if the man kept following her. After getting in the car, the woman let out a long sigh of relief. She didn't know when she had started sweating profusely. The driver looked at her from the rearview mirror and asked if she was okay. She was afraid that the driver would tell Gu Xiaobo and he would be worried again, so she smiled and said that she was fine. Maybe she was too tired. On the way back, the woman didn't think much about it. After all, she had met such a wretched man when she was in Hangzhou before. Maybe it was just a coincidence today. Not long after, the driver sent her to the gate of the community. She smiled and thanked him, then got out of the car with her things. She had already forgotten about what had happened just now. She was thinking about watching an old movie that she liked at night. However, when she walked to the gate of the community, she suddenly found that the man who had followed her in the shopping mall was actually standing there, staring at her with a wretched smile on his face. The woman was startled, and the things in her hands fell to the ground. She almost cried out loud. Seeing her like this, the smile on the man's face became wider. The woman was a little panicked. After coming to her senses, she quickly picked up her things and walked into the community quickly. She didn't dare to look at the man again. When she walked into the community for a certain distance, she thought she would be safe. However, when she inadvertently turned around, she found that the man was still following her. This time, she was completely panicked. She almost trotted into the building where she was and quickly pressed the elevator to go upstairs for fear that the man would follow her. When she went home and put down her things, the first thing she did was to call Gu Xiaobo. She was too scared. If it wasn't for Gu Xiaobo, she probably wouldn't dare to sleep tonight. In the farmhouse on Chongming Island, when Gu Xiaobo received the woman's call, his whole face changed instantly. He was not afraid of anything, not even death. The only thing he was afraid of was the woman and the child in her belly. Therefore, after comforting the woman, Gu Xiaobo immediately drove back to the city. Chapter 662. It was finally here. What Gu Xiaobo was most afraid of had happened. Yin Xiaozong could use this woman to threaten him in the past. Now Qin Sheng might also use this woman to threaten him. This was his only weakness in this world. Therefore, he had never let this woman get in touch with his current friends in order to protect her better. Now this woman was pregnant with his child, which made Gu Xiaobo more and more worried. Gu Xiaobo had never been afraid of paying the price for the mistakes he had made in the past, nor was he afraid of death. He had long been prepared for this. If he was lucky enough not to die this time, he would leave Shanghai with this woman and find a strange small city to live a carefree life. Then he would hide all his past and slowly wait for his child to grow up. But he also knew that this possibility was very small. Anyway, Gu Xiaobo only had one bottom line. That was he could die, but nothing could happen to this woman and his child. So after receiving the woman's call, Gu Xiaobo immediately panicked. Of course, he knew what was going on. Obviously, this woman had been discovered by Qin Sheng. Except for Qin Sheng, there could be no one else. Therefore, Gu Xiaobo drove to the city without hesitation. After all, the woman was pregnant. Once she was surprised, any accident could happen. Gu Xiaobo didn't want to see the worst result. When Gu Xiaobo returned to the city, Song Ryu had also arrived in Shanghai. Qin Sheng was still working overtime in the office of the World Financial Center. Almost everyone in the company didn't leave. Everyone knew that this restructuring was stressful, but it was also an opportunity. If they performed well, they were likely to be promoted. Fang Fei had left. She didn't come to Shanghai to work overtime. She just wanted to monitor Qin Sheng or drag him down by the way. For Song Ryu, it was very easy to find Qin Sheng. It was nothing more than a few phone calls. Besides, she could directly ask Qin Ran, but she didn't do so. When Yin Pan walked into the office and told Qin Sheng that a lady named Song Ryu was looking for him at the front desk, Qin Sheng was stunned for a moment. Didn't Song Ryu go back to Beijing? Why did she suddenly appear in Shanghai? After Qin Sheng came to his senses, he immediately got up and went to the front desk to pick up Song Ryu. He always felt that Song Ryu suddenly appeared in Shanghai and suddenly looked for him. He must have something to tell her. Otherwise, why would she even call him? At the front desk of Qin Sheng's company, Song Ryu, who only had her bag with her, went straight to Qin Sheng's company after getting off the plane. She was wearing a printed chiffon dress, looking as pure and charming as ever. The two beauties at the front desk whispered to each other, saying that this lady was really beautiful and had a kind of ethereal aura. They didn't know what her relationship with Chairman Qin was, but they had already seen Chairman Qin's real girlfriend, who was also their former colleague, Lin Su. In the beginning, everyone was still guessing in private. They said that after Lin Su came to the company, so many colleagues pursued her, but she was indifferent. It turned out that she had hooked up with the group's young master. They didn't know when she became famous. Almost all the female colleagues were jealous of her. Later, people didn't know who said that Lin Su had been the young master's girlfriend for a long time. They had been dating for a long time, and Lin Su had come to the company to help the young lady. Moreover, Lin Su was the young lady of Ningbo's Lin Group. She was not an ordinary office worker like everyone had guessed at the beginning. At this time, people suddenly understood why the two of them were together. It turned out that they were a perfect match for each other. Therefore, people instantly felt balanced in their hearts. They didn't envy, jealousy, or hate them anymore. They only regretted that they were not born in a rich family. See, human nature was so simple. If Lin Su was like them, they would feel unbalanced in their hearts. But after knowing that Lin Su was the young lady of a rich family, they immediately felt balanced. Song Ryu had nothing to do, so she looked at some of the designs at the front desk. She didn't know whether it was right or wrong to suddenly come to Shanghai, but if she didn't do this, she would feel somewhat uneasy. When Qin Sheng walked out, Song Ryu was in a daze. Qin Sheng quickly walked over and frowned. "Ryu, why are you here?" Song Ryu came to her senses and said nervously, "Why can't I be here?" Qin Sheng didn't know what to ask, so he had to say, "Let's talk in my office." Qin Sheng took Song Ryu to his office. On the way, the colleagues who worked overtime all paid attention to Song Ryu. After all, Song Ryu was very attractive. Besides, who didn't like beautiful women? Like those at the front desk, these people were also guessing Song Ryu's identity. Some of them even made a bed in private, of course, daring not to let others know. Song Ryu seemed to be used to this. Her eyes were as clear as water. She didn't feel embarrassed or flustered at all. She just followed Qin Sheng and walked forward. After entering the office, Zhongshan nodded politely to Song Ryu and then stood up and left. Yin Pan poured a glass of water and left immediately after. At this time, Qin Sheng opened his mouth and asked, "Didn't you go back to Beijing? Why did you suddenly come back to Shanghai? What's the matter?" Song Ryu stared at Qin Sheng for a while and said, "I know what happened to Hao Lei." Song Ryu directly told Qin Sheng the purpose of this trip. Qin Sheng didn't understand for a while. It seemed that Hao Lei's matter had nothing to do with Song Ryu. Moreover, Song Ryu didn't know Hao Lei. So, Qin Sheng thought for a few seconds and seemed to understand what was going on. He didn't care how Song Ryu found out about it. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Ryu, don't tell me you blame yourself for what happened to Hao Lei. Am I wrong? If I didn't trouble you to pick me up that night, you wouldn't have had any conflict with them. If not, Hao Lei wouldn't have happened." Song Ryu explained in this way. Qin Sheng didn't expect that Song Ryu suddenly came to Shanghai for this matter. He didn't know how to explain it to Song Ryu. He couldn't let her think that it had something to do with her. Qin Sheng let out a long sigh and paced back and forth, thinking about how to explain it. After a while, he said, "How did you know about it?" Song Ryu shook her head and said, "Don't worry about it. Since you said so, I'll tell you the truth. It's not what you think. I had some conflicts with Xue Ku and Gu Yoning before, but they were all under the table. This time, I just shed all pretense of cordiality. Even if they didn't take the initiative to make trouble for me, I wouldn't have done so, not to mention the old grudges between the Qin family and their families. So it really has nothing to do with you." Qin Sheng had to explain in detail so that Song Ryu could be completely relieved. Qin Sheng's seriousness seemed to be similar to what Song Husheng had said. Song Ryu couldn't help thinking about it seriously. Maybe she really thought too much. Qin Sheng continued to say, "What's more, these are only part of it. There are too many things involved. I can't explain it to you in a short time. Anyway, don't think too much. It definitely has nothing to do with you." Song Ryu frowned and said, "Really?" Qin Sheng nodded solemnly and said, "Yes, I don't need to lie to you about these things. I thought you had something to do in Shanghai. It turns out to be this. Okay, I believe you. I'll go to see Hao Lei tomorrow morning and then go back to Beijing," Song Ryu said calmly. She felt somewhat impulsive. Qin Sheng didn't refuse, but he suddenly felt that something was wrong. His relationship with Song Ryu seemed to have changed unconsciously. They didn't stay in the office for long. Qin Sheng asked the driver to send Song Ryu to her best friend's place. When Qin Sheng came back from the elevator with Song Ryu, Lin Su walked out of the elevator with a lunchbox in her hand. If Song Husheng knew about it, he would probably be half dead with anger. The two beauties at the front desk were also thinking that it would be even more interesting if that beauty had met Qin Sheng's real girlfriend. However, it was just their bad taste. Lin Su stopped Qin Sheng. Qin Sheng looked at the tired Lin Su and said worriedly, "It's so late. Why don't you go home and rest? Why are you here?" "I can't sleep at home. I don't know what time you'll be back, so I brought you some supper," Lin Su said with a smile, holding the lunchbox in her hand. Qin Sheng was very touched. "Thank you." On Chongming Island, at this moment, a life and death chase was going on. Not long after Gu Xiaobo left the farmhouse, Yang Daniu's car directly followed him. After passing 2 crossings, he began to chase Gu Xiaobo's car at full speed. After a while, Yang Daniu caught up with Gu Xiaobo's car. After all, it was absolutely true that he had competed with professional racers. During this period, Qin Sheng had verified his skills. After Yang Daniu's car drove side by side with Gu Xiaobo's car, Yang Daniu casually glanced at Gu Xiaobo and then crashed into him without hesitation. Bang! Gu Xiaobo's car was almost knocked off the road. Fortunately, Gu Xiaobo's reaction was very fast. He subconsciously held the steering wheel and did not let the car go out of control. Gu Xiaobo did not notice it at first. At this moment, his mind was focused on his wife and child at home. On his way back, he made 2 more phone calls, asking about the current situation and whether the man who had been following her had appeared again. The woman said in fear, "I don't know. I don't dare to go out and see." Therefore, Gu Xiaobo could only speed up and rush back. Yang Daniu's crash directly woke Gu Xiaobo up. At first, Gu Xiaobo thought it was a normal car accident. At first, when he controlled the car, he found that the car next to him had crashed into him again, and it was very determined. At this moment, Gu Xiaobo finally understood that it was definitely not a coincidence that the car was coming for him. Then, Gu Xiaobo seemed to understand the logic behind it. Why was the woman being followed? Why was someone coming for him the moment he left the farmhouse? Obviously, everything was prepared. Then who could it be? Gu Xiaobo did not have to think to know that apart from Qin Sheng, who else could it be? Chapter 663. Never Regret. I recommend a book about urban systems. It's very cool to read. It's called Urban God Level Superman. Everyone can check it out. Gu Xiaobo had been waiting for this day. When he knew that Qin Sheng and Chang Baji were not dead, he knew that this day would come sooner or later. It was just a matter of time. Now it finally came. To be honest, Gu Xiaobo hated himself now. In the past, he was frivolous and didn't have any expectations for the future. He thought that it was enough to live a good life without anyone giving him any pressure. He lived a carefree life and didn't want to be rich. But what about him now? He became more and more taciturn. Except for that woman and the child in her belly, he had no interest in anything else. Every day, he was like a walking corpse, muddling along. It was as if he knew where he belonged, and there was nothing to worry about. Of course, the thing that he hated the most was that he had become a dog of the Yin family. A dog that bit whoever it saw. This was not what he had hoped for. Of course, he was also hoping for a fluke. Why was he hoping for a fluke? It was because of that woman and the child in her womb. He felt that as long as he fought with his life on the line, he might be able to survive. At that time, he would be able to change his life. However, he also knew that this type of hope was extremely slim, and right now, it was even more impossible. Taking a step back, he felt that he was satisfied to be able to live until now. When he knew that Qin Sheng had returned to Shanghai and had become the young master of the Qin family, he knew that his fate had come to an end. He had been waiting for this day, but it never came. He had had enough of these days of fear, and now he finally didn't have to worry anymore. Yang Daniu's car crashed into Gu Xiaobo's car again. Gu Xiaobo was prepared this time. Luckily, his SUV had good performance. Even though it had been hit twice, it did not lose control, and the damage was not too serious. Gu Xiaobo couldn't see clearly who was driving the car. After all, it was late at night, and there were no other cars on this road. It could be said to be a good place to make a move, so he judged that the other party came prepared. Gu Xiaobo knew that he might die, but no one wanted to die. He didn't want to die either. He still wanted to survive the crisis and then run away with his wife and children. Therefore, Gu Xiaobo sped up and rushed forward, trying to get away from the car next to him. However, he couldn't. Yang Daniu's driving skills were too good. Just like that, the two sides went back and forth, colliding several times on the village road. It was like an American-style police chase. If it was in a movie, the audience would definitely be thrilled. Unfortunately, there was no audience at the moment. Yang Daniu cast a sidelong glance at Gu Xiaobo, and a mocking smile appeared on his face. He looked down on such a man. What kind of man was he to betray his sect and kill his junior brother for a woman? Yang Daniu sped up again and suddenly turned the steering wheel to block Gu Xiaobo's car. He forced Gu Xiaobo to go into the woods by the roadside. At the same time, he tried to control the steering wheel so that he wouldn't be knocked over by Gu Xiaobo. This required skills, so Yang Daniu's experience came in handy at this time. Gu Xiaobo realized that he had no hope of getting rid of Yang Daniu, so he had to force his way into the bamboo forest. He directly crashed Yang Daniu's car into a tree. Yang Xiaobo Gu Yang said of Yang. He Gu, Xia Gu, or he of come on. Let's see who can survive in the end. Gu Xiaobo was most curious about who Qin Sheng would send. Was it Uncle Chang or someone else? But no matter who it was, he would not admit defeat and beg for mercy. He would fight to the death. Luckily, only the front of the car had hit the tree, and the airbag had popped out. If the driver had hit the tree, he would have been in trouble. Therefore, at the last moment, young Daniel controlled the direction of the crash forcefully. Young Daniel's eyes lit up. Young Daniel's eyes lit up. Young Daniel opened the door and got out of the car with difficulty. He walked around the two cars and walked towards Gu Xiaobo. Gu Xiaobo was also walking towards Young Daniel. They met in the blink of an eye. It was raining heavily in the north, but the moon was bright and the stars were sparse in the south. So Gu Xiaobo saw the man in front of him at first sight. When he saw the man's face clearly, he was so shocked that he didn't know what to do. He said in a trembling voice, "Second senior brother." Yang Daniel said bluntly, "Yo, you still recognize me, Gu Xiaobo? It's a pity that I don't have a junior brother like you." Gu Xiaobo had actually only met second senior brother a few times, and it was many years ago. He heard more about second senior brother from his senior brothers in Master. Second senior brother was the most outstanding disciple taught by Master. Later, he heard that second senior brother had traveled around the world. He hadn't seen him for a few years. He didn't expect to see him here today. How could Gu Xiaobo not be shocked? In order to deal with him, even second senior brother came out of the mountain. It could be seen how much they hated him. Perhaps Master had already known about it, so he asked second senior brother to get rid of the evil for the sect. However, Gu Xiaobo also felt lucky. No matter how powerful second senior brother was, he was not as powerful as Uncle Chong. If it was Uncle Chong who came, then he wouldn't have much hope to leave alive. So he still had a chance tonight. Moreover, whether it was second senior brother or Uncle Chong who came, Gu Xiaobo would fight to the death. So it didn't matter. Gu Xiaobo stopped and said self-mockingly, "Second senior brother doesn't recognize me, but I will still recognize second senior brother. Master has already expelled you from the sect, so we have nothing to do with each other now. I'm not your second senior brother. Today, I only come for one thing, which is to get rid of you, the scum of the sect, and to avenge junior brother Gu Qingyang, who has already died." Yang Daniel sneered. His attitude was very firm, and there was no room for negotiation. The two cars were almost scrapped. In this wilderness, even if there were cars passing by, they would not dare to stop easily. After all, it was better to avoid trouble. Gu Xiaobo said casually, "So it seems that second senior brother is here to kill me today?" This sentence made Yang Daniel confused. Isn't this nonsense? I made such a big scene, chased you, raced and crashed you. Is it possible that I am here to talk about the old days with you? So Yang Daniel stared at Gu Xiaobo as if he was looking at a fool. He smiled and said, "Then let's talk for a while." Actually, Yang Daniel was really funny. If ordinary people heard this sentence, they would probably burst out laughing. However, Gu Xiaobo was not in the mood. He squinted his eyes and said, "Second senior brother, do you really want to fight?" Yang Daniel knew that Gu Xiaobo was already prepared, so he did not say any nonsense and went straight to Gu Xiaobo. Gu Xiaobo said, thoughtfully, "It is said that second senior brother is the most powerful disciple that senior brother has ever taught. Then let me see whether second senior brother is worthy of his reputation." Before Gu Xiaobo's voice died away, Yang Daniel, who did not like to talk nonsense, had already rushed to Gu Xiaobo's front. If it could be solved by fighting, then don't talk. Moreover, he hoped to end it as soon as possible. Yang Daniel's aura was like a rainbow. He felt that he had been holding back for a long time. He wanted to kill Gu Xiaobo directly. Gu Xiaobo knew that his strength might not be as good as Yang Daniel's. However, his mentality of seeking death to survive would definitely make him unleash his greatest potential. Otherwise, he could only wait for death. So this was a battle of life and death where the disparity in strength was not big. In the blink of an eye, the atmosphere changed from calm to tense. Yang Daniel, who took the initiative to attack, kicked at Gu Xiaobo's shoulder. Gu Xiaobo bent down and dodged it calmly. Yang Daniel followed up with a roundhouse kick, which went straight to Gu Xiaobo's face. Gu Xiaobo had no choice but to step back. Yang Daniel did not give up. He approached Gu Xiaobo and directly punched at him. Gu Xiaobo could only try his best to defend. He did not dare to take the initiative to attack. He tried his best to figure out Yang Daniu's strength and his moves first. Then, he would wait for an opportunity to take action. Yang Daniu was unreasonable. He even scolded, "Gu Xiaobo, is this all you have? If you have the ability, fight back. Let me see where you get the courage to betray your master." Upon hearing this, Gu Xiaobo was indeed a little angry. "Mother of asterisk her, even if I am wrong, I don't need you to fight with me. If you have the ability, kill me." He roared and pushed Yang Daniu's knee away with force. Taking advantage of this free time, he stepped on the broken tire on the right side of the car and punched at Yang Daniu. This punch could be said to be all the pressure that Gu Xiaobo had accumulated during this period. He was really too depressed and needed to vent his anger. Yang Daniu did not care about it. He just stretched out his arm casually to block it. However, only then did he feel that Yang Daniu's strength was so great that it was much stronger than he had imagined. Before he came back to his senses, Gu Xiaobo followed up with a series of attacks. Every time, Gu Xiaobo's momentum was to kill 10,000 of the enemies and 8,000 of his own. It meant that even if he died, he would drag Yang Daniu down with him. After Yang Daniu took a few steps back, he said loudly, "Interesting. You did not disappoint me first. Then, I will let you die in peace today." Gu Xiaobo needed to vent his anger. His strength had increased greatly, and Yang Daniu's fighting spirit was also stimulated. The two of them did not care about anything anymore. They directly started to attack each other in the most overbearing way. Gu Xiaobo resisted Yang Daniu's wave after wave of counterattacks. Of course, he had already suffered a lot of losses. The number of times he was hit became more and more, and he even fell to the ground twice. Yang Daniu did not dare to let his guard down. All these years, he had always been very careful. He would not underestimate any opponent, because he did not know when he would fall. After all, the martial world was dangerous, and people's hearts were even more unpredictable. This was the experience that he had accumulated after suffering a lot of losses. Although Yang Daniu's strength was stronger, Gu Xiaobo seemed to have taken some medicine today. He was more powerful than usual. Moreover, during this period of time, Gu Xiaobo had known that such a day would come. Therefore, he had been constantly becoming stronger. Therefore, Yang Daniu also suffered a lot of losses. It was just that he was slightly better than Gu Xiaobo. Once again, Gu Xiaobo used a trick of destroying indiscriminately. When he was hit by Yang Daniu and sent flying, he also kicked Yang Daniu's shoulder. The two of them flew backward at the same time. Blood flowed out from the corner of Gu Xiaobo's mouth. His face was even more terrible. There were a few abrasions on his face. He casually wiped his face and looked even more ferocious. Yang Daniu's side was almost the same. His clothes and pants were torn, and there were a few cuts on them. His shoulder and ribs were also injured. In the car, Gu Xiaobo's phone had already rang several times. The woman was somewhat worried about Gu Xiaobo, so she kept calling him. However, no one answered. The more it was like this, the more worried she was. Just now, she asked the housekeeper to go downstairs to have a look. The man who had been following her had already disappeared. Perhaps it was a false alarm. Therefore, she was worried that Gu Xiaobo had come here from afar. What if there was an accident on the way? Therefore, she planned to tell him not to come back. However, no matter how hard she tried, she could not get through to him. Outside the farmhouse, Chang Baji was talking to Bao Fan on the phone. Bao Fan asked if Yang Daniu had made any progress. Before the fight, Chang Baji had already informed Bao Fan, because they had to clean up the mess later and control the matter within the scope. Bao Fan did not know Yang Daniu's strength, so he asked doubtfully, "Can Yang Daniu handle it?" Chang Baji was silent for a moment and said, "Don't worry. Gu Xiaobo is definitely not Yang Daniu's opponent. However, knowing that he will definitely die, Gu Xiaobo will definitely try his best. Naturally, Yang Daniu will not gain any advantage." Since Chang Baji had already said so, Bao Fan did not think much about it. He replied, "Then I will wait for your news." At the scene of the collision, Gu Xiaobo, who was in a desperate fight, was in a bad situation. His face was somewhat pale. He had used up too much of his strength, and the breath he had been holding up all the time was already somewhat relaxed. Yang Dainyu gradually gained the upper hand. This time, he kicked Gu Xiaobo away. However, Gu Xiaobo could not do anything and did not gain any advantage. The results seemed to be fixed. It was only a matter of time. Yang Dainyu asked casually, "Gu Xiaobo, do you regret falling into such a situation?" Gu Xiaobo climbed up from the ground, clenched his teeth, and rushed over again. At the same time, he shouted, "I never regret it." Chapter 664. Fate Makes Fools of Men. Gu Xiaobo was like an arrow at the end of its flight. It was impossible for him to kill Yang Dainyu. Even though he had been improving his strength recently, the gap of strength could not be made up in just a few months. Just like how one could only know the importance of talent after hard work. Sometimes people had to accept their fate. Gu Xiaobo had always been clear that he would be killed by Qin Sheng sooner or later. However, he always had a fluke mentality. That was why he chose to go all the way, so that he could have a chance to survive. However, at this moment, all his fluke and hope had been destroyed. Yang Dainyu would not give him such a chance. Gu Xiaobo rushed over again with the mentality of destroying everything indiscriminately. As soon as he arrived, he punched several times consecutively. It seemed to be very lethal, which made Yang Dainyu a little surprised. Perhaps this was the last radiance of the setting sun before death. Over the years, Yang Dainyu had experienced too many things. He had struggled in the swamp at the bottom and seen the scenery and exaggeration at the top. He had also experienced many moments of life and death like tonight. Every time, he could persist until the end. It might be a fluke or luck, but after so many times, it showed his strength. Yang Dainyu avoided Gu Xiaobo's attack. This time, he did not give Gu Xiaobo a chance to die together with him. He kept retreating to avoid Gu Xiaobo's attack and tried to defend in a way that would not be at a disadvantage. However, Yang Dainyu was still hit by Gu Xiaobo's head. Gu Xiaobo seemed to be telling Yang Dainyu, "I don't care if you're a second senior brother or anyone else. If you don't let me live, I will not let you live well. Let's die together." Gu Xiaobo hit Yang Dainyu's chest with his head. Yang Dainyu clenched his teeth and rubbed his chest. It was really painful. He finally understood why Uncle Chong sent him here. It was not only to let him clean up the sect, but also because Gu Xiaobo's strength was really good. Besides him, the most excellent disciple, Gu Xiaobo, and Gu Qingyang were the disciples that their master valued more. Otherwise, how could they follow Uncle Chong to go out of the mountain? Come on, second senior brother. You're just SOSO. Gu Xiaobo shouted crazily. Yang Dainyu stared at Gu Xiaobo fiercely. Gu Xiaobo had really irritated him this time. How could such an unrepentant beast be qualified to live in this world? In that case, Yang Dainyu should kowtow to junior brother Gu Qingyang and apologize. Yang Dainyu did not want to give Gu Xiaobo any chance. He said angrily, "You are courting death." Hence, Yang Dainyu, who had completely unleashed his power, charged towards Gu Xiaobo with a ferocious look. Compared to Gu Xiaobo's aura just now, it was not an exaggeration to say that it was as powerful as a thunderbolt. His lightning-fast attack was mixed with an absolute suppression of strength. Even though Gu Xiaobo knew Yang Dainyu's tricks, Yang Dainyu's power was too strong. In addition, he was already at the end of his rope. They were not on the same level at all. Then, the result was that Gu Xiaobo was forced to retreat by Yang Dainyu's punches and kicks. He was injured everywhere. In the end, he didn't even have the ability to defend. He was directly kicked in the head by Yang Dainyu and flew out. This time, Gu Xiaobo struggled to get up, but he could not. He could only lie on the ground like a dead dog. Yang Dainyu walked over slowly and stepped on Gu Xiaobo's body. He stared at Gu Xiaobo coldly, without any emotion, as if it had nothing to do with him. This was Yang Dainyu's true appearance. Yang Dainyu, who looked like a hooligan, a wretched uncle, and so on, was actually cold and inhuman. All of this was just a disguise for him to fool around in the world. Why did Yang Dainyu behave like this? There were several reasons. Firstly, it was his childhood experience. He was an orphan and had no one to rely on. Naturally, he had more experience than others. Secondly, during the period of time when Yang Dainyu was apprenticed to a master in Tianmu Mountain, Chang Baji's senior apprentice brother had profound attainments in the cultivation of the mind. Yang Dainyu looked like a big and burly man, but he was very talented in this aspect. It was just like his talent in martial arts, which was innate. Therefore, those thoughts of Taoism made him even more so. Thirdly, when he had been traveling all these years, he had been to so many places and so many cities. He had experienced too much and seen too much of the dark side of society. As a result, the coldness in his bones had once again been deeply rooted. Therefore, if his master hadn't called him personally to come back to help, with Yang Dainyi's temper, he wouldn't have come back except to send his master off. In this way, Yang Dainyu and Chang Baji were somewhat similar. However, Chang Baji was more like the mortal world. Many of Yang Dainyu's things were a disguise. Do you regret it? Yang Dainyu asked again. He didn't believe that Gu Xiaobo could be so stubborn. Gu Xiaobo, whose face was covered in blood, laughed crazily. It seemed that he was laughing at Yang Dainyu. However, he couldn't provoke Yang Dainyu at all. Therefore, he laughed and said, "Senior fellow apprentice, you are really boring. I have said that I don't regret it. I really don't. I will pay back what I owe you in my next life. But I really don't regret it." Although Yang Dainyu hated this guy, he still had to say, "Gu Xiaobo, you have guts." Ha ha ha. Senior fellow apprentice, send me on my way. I have been waiting for this day for a long time. It is my blessing to die in your hands. Gu Xiaobo closed his eyes, somewhat relieved. However, he was thinking about the woman and the child in her belly. If she could not see him again, what would she do? Would she go to find him? Would she gradually forget him? Would she tell her future child who her father was? Ha ha, I am going to die soon. What is the point of thinking about these? Anyway, I will not know anything after I die. As long as she and the child live well, I can do whatever I want. Fortunately, he had left his child in this world. At least, he could tell others that he had been to this world in the future. Just when Gu Xiaobo was letting his imagination run wild, Yang Dainyu had already taken action quietly. Gu Xiaobo's vision turned black, and he passed out completely. Outside the farmhouse, Chang Baji finally received Yang Dainyu's call. Although he believed that with Yang Dainyu's help, there would definitely be no accidents, it was inevitable that he would be worried after such a long time had passed. Now that he finally received Yang Dainyu's call, he was completely relieved. Therefore, he immediately informed Bao Fan to clean up the mess. He asked the others to continue watching over here and inform him if there was any news. In a residential area in Jing, and among the thousands of lights, every light was shining on the hearts of those who had not gone home yet. Among them, there was a light that was lit for Gu Xiaobo. However, Gu Xiaobo could not come back anymore. The woman had already made countless calls and almost called the police. However, there was still no news about Gu Xiaobo. This made her start to let her imagination run wild. Did something really happen to him? In the end, the woman really had no choice but to call Feng He. Although she was a little afraid of this man, she could not care less about it now. Feng He picked up the phone impatiently. The woman told him the reason while trembling. After listening, Feng He's expression changed slightly. He said that he would find a way to contact Gu Xiaobo and inform her if there was any news. After that, he hung up the phone. Then, Feng He called Gu Xiaobo's several mobile phones. However, there was still no news. Feng He realized that something might have happened. In the office of the World International Financial Center, Qin Sheng, Zhong Shan, and the others continued to work overtime after having supper. Lin Su did not go home, but accompanied Qin Sheng in the office. Anyway, she had already met these people, so she did not care what the others in the company thought. In the end, when Lin Su was a little tired, she chatted with Yin Pan. Occasionally, they talked about Yin Pan's boyfriend. Yin Pan started to complain to her. Lin Su also took the opportunity to enlighten Yin Pan. The two of them chatted to their heart's content. Yin Pan did not expect Qin Sheng's real girlfriend to be so amiable and approachable. She did not have the unruly and arrogant temperament of a rich girl at all. Instead, she was more like a girl next door. The two of them talked and laughed. At this time, Qin Sheng received a call from Chang Baji, who told him that Gu Xiaobo had been arrested. What should he do now? At that time, Chang Baji told Yang Dainyu that it would be best if they could catch Gu Xiaobo alive. If not, they should kill him on the spot. They could never let him go. Fortunately, Yang Dainyu got Gu Xiaobo alive. In this case, they would meet Gu Xiaobo again. Qin Sheng frowned and said, "Where? I'll go there now." Chang Baji told Qin Sheng that they were on their way back to the city. At the same time, he told Qin Sheng where they would meet later. After finalizing some details, he hung up the phone. After hanging up the phone, Qin Sheng stood up slowly and said to Zhongshan, "Lao Zhong, let's call it a day. It's getting late. Let's go home and have a rest. We'll continue tomorrow. I have something to do, so I have to go now." Zhongshan didn't know what was going on, but he knew that Qin Sheng had been troubled by all kinds of things recently, especially Hao Lei's matter. Hearing the conversation, Lin Su quickly walked over and asked, "What's wrong?" Qin Sheng hugged Lin Su's shoulder and said, "It's getting late. I'll send you home first. Lao Chang has something to do. I have to go and deal with it." Lin Su was worried and said, "Be careful. It's nothing. It's just a small matter. Don't worry. I'll go back early after I finish my work. Don't wait for me. Go to sleep when you get home." Qin Sheng smiled and said. Lin Su nodded silently. Then, several bodyguards escorted Qin Sheng and Lin Su to leave the company and go back to Lu Jiazhui's central apartment. This time, several cars directly drove into the underground garage of the community. Qin Sheng sent Lin Su home personally and then left. In the underground garage, Qin Sheng, who was cautious, changed to another car. At the same time, they would split into two groups. At that time, the two cars would take a detour. In this way, they could prevent being followed. After all, Gu Xiaobo's life would be decided tonight. It was not good to leave any evidence, especially Qin Sheng now. An hour later, Qin Sheng appeared in a courtyard in the suburbs. It was a smooth journey and they did not encounter any accidents. Maybe they were fully prepared. In the courtyard, there was no one except Chang Baji, Bao Fan, and Yang Dainyu. Bao Fan was so careful to prevent the news from leaking out. After the bodyguards sent Qin Sheng home, they left. They would come back to pick Qin Sheng up when the time came. "He's inside," Chang Baji said calmly. Qin Sheng nodded slightly. Then, he walked to Yang Dainyu and said, "Dainyu, you've worked hard tonight." Yang Dainyu smiled and did not say anything, because it was too pretentious. Moreover, of course, he had worked hard tonight. He was injured in many places. Fortunately, they were all minor injuries and did not hurt his muscles or bones. After entering the room, Qin Sheng saw Gu Xiaobo, who was tied up in the corner. Miserable, embarrassed, pitiful, sad. Qin Sheng had too many adjectives to describe Gu Xiaobo at the moment. This was the first time they met after half a year. Chapter 665. That must be it. Yang Dainyu's most important task this time was to clean up the traitors for the sect. Now he had accomplished this task. Senior Uncle Chang had asked him to keep Gu Xiaobo alive if he could, but not to kill him directly. Now he had kept Gu Xiaobo alive. As for how to deal with it later, it was Qin Sheng's business. However, Yang Dainyu felt that Qin Sheng would definitely not let Gu Xiaobo go. According to his understanding of Qin Sheng would not do something like returning good for evil. Yang Dainyu had already dealt with the wounds. He just needed to apply some ointment on other parts of the body. He had suffered too much and suffered too many injuries. This was really not a big deal. Bao Fan had arranged people to keep watch outside the yard. If there were any strangers approaching, they would naturally be alerted. In the room, Qin Sheng stood in front of Gu Xiaobo and sighed with emotion. There were 3 other people standing behind him. Bao Fan did not know Gu Xiaobo, so he naturally did not feel anything. Needless to say about Yang Dainyu, there was only Chang Baji left. Chang Baji had already seen Gu Xiaobo before Qin Sheng came. However, he did not wake Gu Xiaobo up. He was just a little disappointed. After all, he was the one who brought Gu Xiaobo and Gu Qingyang out. Now Gu Qingyang was dead, and Gu Xiaobo was in such a state. If he did not bring them out at that time, perhaps these things would not have happened. Chang Baji did not blame himself. He just sighed with emotion. After all, everyone made their own choices in life. No one could be blamed for what they did, and they had to pay the price. Compared to Chang Baji, who was calm, Qin Sheng was more emotional. The memory of Gu Xiaobo and Gu Qingyang following him in Hangzhou was like yesterday. However, there were only memories left. Now, Gu Qingyang died to protect him, and Gu Xiaobo betrayed him and ended up in such a state. Qin Sheng was thinking, if Gu Xiaobo did not betray him, what would have happened? Back then, they had escaped from Hangzhou safely. As long as they held on for another month, he would have returned to Beijing and become the Qin Sheng that he was today. If they had followed him today, they might not have achieved meteoric success, but at least they would have a bright future. Even he, Gu Xiaobo, would definitely have a much better life than he was in the Yin family now. However, there was no if. All this was Gu Xiaobo's fault. He even caused Gu Qingyang's death. Therefore, Qin Sheng was very resentful towards Gu Xiaobo. After standing in front of Gu Xiaobo for a long time, Qin Sheng said, "Wake him up." Yang Daniu immediately took a basin of water that had been prepared by the side and splashed it on Gu Xiaobo's face. Gu Xiaobo, who was about to lose consciousness, opened his eyes in a daze. When he saw Qin Sheng and Chang Baji standing in front of him, Gu Xiaobo laughed at himself. He did not feel guilty or blamed himself at all. He faced them calmly. "Brother Qin, Martial Uncle Chang, long time no see," Gu Xiaobo said in a weak voice. His face and tone were very calm. He looked straight at Qin Sheng and Chang Baji and did not avoid their eyes at all. Chang Baji didn't say anything. Just like Yang Daniu, his eyes were very cold. Only someone who was extremely disappointed in someone would have such an expression. Gu Xiaobo's calmness made Qin Sheng somewhat uncomfortable. He frowned and said, "Xiaobo, have you thought about the consequences today?" Gu Xiaobo laughed and said, "Brother Qin, I thought that when we met again, no matter what the situation was, you would scold or beat me first. I didn't expect that you would be so polite. It's not good for you to be like this." Qin Sheng replied directly, "What's the use? Do I still need it?" Gu Xiaobo smiled bitterly. He was not embarrassed at all and was not afraid at all. He replied, "I have thought about it. Why didn't I think about it? I'm not a big shot who is not afraid of anything. Since I was sure that you were not dead, I knew that such a day would come sooner or later. I have been waiting for this day all the time. Although I wanted to be lucky, after all, who wants to die? I know that the hope is slim. Now you have made me completely give up the idea." In the end, Gu Xiaobo let out a long sigh and said, "It's pretty good. You seem to be very relaxed. But I guess that the reason why you don't want to die is that you can't bear to leave that woman and the child in her belly." Qin Sheng sneered and said in a threatening tone. This was Gu Xiaobo's only flaw. Consequently, after hearing Qin Sheng's words, Gu Xiaobo's expression changed instantly. He stared at Qin Sheng for a while, and then he laughed and said, "Brother Qin, you don't have to threaten me. I know that you are not that kind of person. After all, I've been following you for so long. I know you more or less." Qin Sheng squatted down and reached out his hand to wipe off the blood at the corner of Gu Xiaobo's mouth. He said, "Do you really know me? Do you really think that I will not hurt them? You, Gu Xiaobo, betrayed me for that woman. You killed Gu Qingyang and almost got me killed. I hate you to the core. How can I not cut the weeds and eliminate the roots?" Gu Xiaobo confirmed that Qin Sheng was not joking. His expression became somewhat ferocious. He struggled to move forward, as if he wanted to eat Qin Sheng. He clenched his teeth and seemed to want to say something cruel, such as, "If you dare to hurt them, I will not let you off even if I become a ghost." Unfortunately, he did not say it in the end. All of a sudden, Gu Xiaobo seemed to be completely relaxed. He said in a tone that seemed to be begging for mercy, "Brother Qin, I will take responsibility for what I have done. These things are all done by me. You could do whatever you want to me. Please let them go. They are innocent." Qin Sheng said disdainfully, "Are you qualified to negotiate with me?" Gu Xiaobo was like a fish on the chopping block. Now, Gu Xiaobo was just a powerless prisoner. As a dying man, how could he bargain with Qin Sheng? It was just a fool's talk. It was Qin Sheng's business to deal with that woman and that child. He could not do anything about it. Therefore, after thinking it through, Gu Xiaobo gave up completely and did not bother to say anything else. Maybe it was because he was about to die that his consciousness was higher than many people. Or maybe it was because the Taoist ideas that he had learned from his master when he was young played an important role at this time. Forget it. I can't even take care of myself. How can I care about them? Besides, after I die, I don't know what will happen to them. Let's leave it to fate. Gu Xiaobo directly stepped back and said, as if a dead pig was not afraid of boiling water. He was almost waiting for death. The more he behaved like this, the angrier Qin Sheng was. Qin Sheng said with a gloomy face, "In this case, I think there is nothing to talk about. Then I will send you to hell." Gu Xiaobo closed his eyes as if he had accepted his fate. "Master, Qingyang, Senior Uncle Chong, Brother Qin, I owe you. If there is a chance, I will pay you back in my next life." Qin Sheng's heart had been covered by those dark sides. He forcibly restrained his emotional fluctuations, turned around, and said, "Send him to hell." After saying that, Qin Sheng strode out. After he went out, he gasped in the yard and lit a cigarette silently. As for how they would deal with Gu Xiaobo, he did not care at all. Qin Sheng could not understand. He treated Gu Xiaobo as his brothers in the beginning. Later, Gu Xiaobo betrayed him because of a woman. He could understand it. After all, many people could not resist beauty at all. It was the most difficult for them to endure beauty. Otherwise, there would not be so many emperors who would give up the whole country for beauty. However, Qin Sheng could not understand why Gu Xiaobo did so many bad things. In the end, he did not regret or feel guilty at all. He did not care what they said or did. Bao Fan and Yang Daniu took care of the rest. Chong Baji came out soon. Seeing Qin Sheng smoking, Chong Baji walked over slowly. He patted Qin Sheng's shoulder and said, "Don't think too much. It is not worth it." Qin Sheng smiled bitterly and said calmly, "Let's go back." Indeed, for these people who are not worth it, let them go with the wind. In life, people should cherish those who are worth it. Gu Xiaobo disappeared from this world just like that. As Gu Xiaobo said, Qin Sheng was destined not to do anything to the woman and the child. He was not such a person, and he would not change because of Gu Xiaobo's provocation. After going back, Qin Sheng did not sleep for the whole night. He still could not calm down. The woman who had been waiting for Gu Xiaobo to come home also did not sleep this night. He looked for Gu Xiaobo for the whole night. He could not get in touch with Gu Xiaobo no matter how hard he tried. After dawn, he gave up completely. After all, after knowing the ins and outs of the whole thing, he had roughly guessed some things. In Yin Xiaozong's office in the Yin family's building, he was reporting what had happened last night to Yin Xiaozong. Regarding Gu Xiaobo's disappearance, he was not emotional at all. It seemed that even if Gu Xiaobo was dead, he was dead. Anyway, it was just a matter of time. Yin Xiaozong was surprised and said, "Missing." He nodded and said, "After he left Chongming Island last night, I couldn't get in touch with him at all. Something must have happened. I guess it should be Qin Sheng who did it. So I'm afraid that Gu Xiaobo is already dead." Yin Xiaozong looked very serious. Previously, he was still thinking whether Qin Sheng planned the accident between Shui Ku and Gu Yongning. After what happened to Gu Xiaobo last night, Yin Xiaozong did not need to guess anymore. It must be Qin Sheng. However, he did not expect that Qin Sheng's counterattack would be so quick and sharp. Qin Sheng started to counterattack. Yin Xiaozong said quietly, "First, Shui Ku and Gu Yongning, then Gu Xiaobo. Then it must be us next." He said meaningfully, "Young master, you said that Shui Ku and Gu Yongning's car accident was also planned by Qin Sheng? Aren't they a little too crazy? If they really died in the car accident that night, wouldn't Qin Sheng get into big trouble? You think too little of Qin Sheng and the Qin family. If he dares to do this, he must have a backup plan," Yin Xiaozong judged. He replied, "Then, should we be careful next? According to young master, once Gu Xiaobo is dead, the next thing will definitely be us." Yin Xiaozong said disapprovingly, "What will come eventually. We can't hide, nor can we escape. Moreover, we are not necessarily afraid of him now. Young master, We can't wait for them to take action. Why don't we take the initiative to attack? Feng, he suggested. As Yin Chaozong's confident and incompetent advisor, Feng, he was very smart. Yin Chaozong sneered and said, "That's for sure. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories."